According to this worldview,
Shoot, yeah. All right. I have worked so hard to get this together, and then it just didn't want to work because I didn't reboot the software. That's cool. So, hey, kitty cat. Hey, girl. I'm so glad you're here because yes, I got it. Check this shit out. Check this out. Oh, good. You can see me. Yeah, I just needed to reboot the software because yeah. Check this out.
the behavior of organisms, including human beings,
Do we need to
is
turn it up?
predictable and therefore controllable.
Oh wait, no, I have little headphones for that. Look, a friend of mine loaned me a pair of nice earbuds, so you guys won't have to hear that echo, which I know y'all are probably getting when I play that. But yeah, we got it. Look at that. Look at that poor little baby. We'll make him a little smaller for a minute. Ah, because y'all, that was. I'm so sorry y'all had to hear that. That was just par for the course around here. Unfortunately, that is just how it goes. Uh, with this. Yesterday, I was trying to get it to link to the hotspot, so turn it down though it's very loud. Okay, cool. Um, can do. We'll adjust that in a little while because we have 3 hours. It is a little less than 2, and we have 3, so we will get to that. We're gonna give some people some time to come to arrive and hang with us because normally I don't start this at 11, so but yeah, I can't work under these conditions, y'all. Like I literally can't. It is so it's I'm sorry. Things around here have just got to the point where I have to leave. I have to get out of here and it's up to me to make it happen. And unfortunately, this isn't proving to be the financial boon that I had been hoping for, which is any at all really. So, not to and I say that Geek Girl just sent me $15, which is amazing. Thank you so much for that. It's not gonna be enough to save up and move, you know. And it's to the point where I can't even and like I didn't know what to make a video about because every single thing that comes out of Washington is worth one on its own. Every single thing, and it's all horrifying. So yeah, I just it's been yeah no okay. We live in my mother-in-law's house. Okay, for the last 10 years, I have lived in my mother-in-law's house, and she has never ever let me forget that for 1 minute. And it's come to the point where she's taken things from me that I can't get back. Um, your institutions are gonna get gutted. Yeah, no, I know. But so it's really hard to like take a broad view on all that shit right now with Trump in charge. Yeah, but I didn't vote for the man, obviously. Um, yeah. Anyway, long story short, my baby sister needed somewhere to stay, and we couldn't reliably provide that for her because that old lady was like threatening to make her homeless and being completely unreasonable about it. And I'm 40 plus years old, and I'm literally sick with having some old lady come along behind me and move my shit. Okay, it is got to the point where yeah, Right. But so it's her house. Like, I can't. She's a little dictator, and she's not rational about any of this stuff. Tough but relatable. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to. I hope they're. I'm sorry to hear that anybody could relate to this. Really, I know a lot of people have mother-in-laws, and a lot of people have troublesome relatives. Which at this point, that's what she is. It's been 10 years. I don't think of her as his mom anymore. You know what I mean? She's all of our problem. And I really don't know which one thing. That was the last thing, was that we had to find some place for my baby sister, who's 20, by the way. She's not a baby, but she's my baby sister. Okay, we had to find some place for her to stay at the last minute, because somebody else was coming home from school and could not share a room for 3 weeks. Just couldn't share a room for 3 weeks. That just wasn't going to happen. And then basically, we make the old lady happy, or we will be out on the sidewalk. And I can't live that way anymore. So I have to go and get a real job and start saving up money so that we can get the fuck out of here. Because if I spend another decade in this house with that woman, one of us is gonna die. Okay. Um, I can't. I can't do that. Like I say, she's taken things from me that I can't get back. She's fucked up my relationship with my kids in like ways that I wanted to parent my kids, most of whom are either, I mean, my youngest from the first batch is about to be a senior in high school. He turned 17 today, actually. And the little one is 7. He's going to be 8. And I don't want to do this for another decade. That's what I'm looking at, doing this for another decade. I can't do that. I can't do that. So I'm going to have to step back from this. And I'm not going away. I'm not going away. This is so important to me. This is that's what those tears really were earlier, was I just want to come on here and kind of say goodbye and do what we've been talking about doing for so long. And it's gonna be so cool to watch this. There it is. This scary ass movie. It looks like I've watched the first 5 minutes of it several times at this point, trying to get this shit working. It's why my mom is so steadfast to keep our family house. Yeah, I don't blame her at all. My parents' generation had treats property like it's candy. I don't know. My Both of my sets of grandparents have passed in the last 20 years, and I didn't see a dime. I don't have any place I could go and stay. They both owned a house. I don't have, there's 2 properties out there that just right through their fingers. My parents' generation, and we don't have anything to show for any of that shit. And that's the thing about the kills. I don't understand this. I My family owns property going back at least the 3 generations that I personally know of. Why am I destitute? Why don't I have anything? Why did I start life with nothing? Does that make any sense? Is that like how this historically has worked? I feel like that's my dad is officially admitted to hospice, so basically he might be around for by my. Oh, I'm sorry. I think we're all going. I'm sorry. Is he comfortable at least? And he gets to have some time to make his peace with it. That's not nothing. Give me your email again after the film. I want to make sure we keep in touch and you have someone. Oh, yeah. Thank you. I already have a pen pal that I've been meaning to write back all week, and I'm finally going to be able to focus on anything else now that I'm going to have this done. Y'all, my whole world has been revolving, or at least in here, has been revolving around this for the last 2 weeks because I just wanted to get it done, and I kept telling myself I need to make a video though. If I'm going to do the live stream, then I need to have a video to put up, and I just couldn't find. I mean, I have found a few things. It's got to the point though where like all the video ideas I really like are something that's gonna take me a little longer to put together anyway. Something I can't really put together in a couple of days anyway. You know what I mean? I'm gonna try and do one a month, maybe. Um, I mean, the latest idea that was amusing me a couple of days ago was that like, and I kind of sort of took this idea from somebody, but that it's giving witchcraft, where like these evangelicals have like reinvented a lot of the Catholic magic that Protestantism left the Catholic Church to get away from in the first place, which is sort of funny. Um, and things like strange fire rituals and incantations and mysticism and shit like that really just crops up all over everywhere, no matter how hard you try and stamp it out. It's almost like witchcraft is the true religion or something. I don't know. I thought there might be something there. It amused me. Legit self care season. Yeah, that's true. That's true. This time of year is always real hard for me anyway. And that's been part of this has been asking myself how much of this is me actually being rational. How much of this is me just being miserable and stuck in the house all the time because it's too cold to go outside. On the other hand, if such a problem only alleviates itself when I can leave the house, then maybe fixing that's not such an irrational idea. And, my dad is the reason that my baby sister needed somewhere to live in the first place, so I wish I could trade you. I do. I'm sorry to say that. Hey, Zippy, what's up? I really appreciated your hard work, and I'm so sorry for these troubles you face. Thank you. I'm not giving up. It feels sometimes like I'm giving up, but I'm not. I'm not. I'm not. What I'm doing is I'm gonna go and get us a better space so that we can do this properly. You know what I mean? I would love to get in on that, kitty cat. Hey, yeah, we could do an email group or something. I would love to do that. I don't. Who knows what that would make it more of an equal conversation, so I'm not the one always on camera and I can't hear you guys. And who knows what would come out in that circumstance? That could be fun. Anyways, yeah. So he actually just got a new job that pays a little better. So now I literally can't, anything I make, I can just bank and save. Okay. So good for your morale. Yeah. Can you see your other comment? We can just do live streams. Maybe something like what GNC Central does and do some read alongs on radical literature. Oh, I hadn't thought of that. I don't know why I hadn't thought of that. Hmm. See, this is why I would miss you guys so much. I That's how it almost feels like a nice compromise, because then we can keep it topical without me having to essentially prepare a video essay first. I mean, is that the comment you were referring to? Because I missed that one. You can do it. It will be hard for a bit, but you're making sense, and it will be better in the long run. Thank you. Sending you good vibes. Wish I had the dough to send cash. It's okay. That's okay. I'm certainly not up here begging for money. I'm telling you, I take it upon myself. It's my responsibility to fix this. You know, that I have kind of sat and done my business and kept my eye on my business. I've really, really, really done my best too. All these years, hoping things would work out, basically. And in some ways they have, and in other ways they haven't. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's all doom and gloom. Like I say, he just got a better job. So I have this opportunity to if I can actually make any kind of real money at all, we can just put it away and save like chipmunks, storing for winter, and um get the fuck out of here. And I can get myself a whole room for this if I want. All right? Doesn't that sound amazing? I really like that idea, Kitty Cat. Thank you. Because the idea of losing these connections is what was really killing me. But you're right. We can still hang out. What am I saying? What am I saying? We can still hang out. Oh my God. Winter definitely does do a number on me. I cannot lie. I and sometimes going back and reading my old, winter diary is like, oh my God. And I've really tried this year to keep it. I was walking every day there for a while. And I had my bright light in the mornings, my depression light, I call it, which is like a weird. It's one of those, um, just sit in the corner and be bright. Seasonal affective disorder lamps. And I was doing pretty good until about a couple of weeks ago, and then the bottom fell out from underneath me. I don't know. Somewhere in that week when the situation in the house fell apart and it became clear that we were going to have to find my sister a place to stay right now, and then driving back and forth from Cleveland, Ohio in one weekend, somewhere in there, I think. Or, maybe it was when we got back here and I got that feeling of just that spooky feeling when someone is just gone all of a sudden. And I know she's okay. I know where she is. So it's not exactly hell, and I'm usually asleep for your yes, anyways, but I'm always up for your live streams, yeah, right? How much work I put into those things. And they'll all still be there, I mean, shoot. Watch one of them go viral while I'm not paying attention. Watch it be from 3 years ago. Stressful, yes. 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 Exactly. And I have got to the point where I have been stressed absolutely up to my hair and getting. I know you do. I know you do. I know you do. Like I say, they're all still up there. Um, I've been stressed absolutely up to my hair, and I'm not getting, you know, anything like what feels like a fair return for my efforts. And I hate to complain because it sounds like I'm complaining about you guys. You guys are like the one group of people that I'm not including in this. um, I'm just so glad I got this thing up. I'm so glad I got this thing up. We'll give it, I don't know, about 15 more minutes, maybe, till about quarter till before we start the movie because I want to give people time to catch on and jump on, right? Um, because I think Joe had commented and Belle had even said that they were going to make this, so, but yeah, so I wanted to go out with a bit of a bang, though, you know what I mean? I don't know how often we would do a live stream. I'll be honest, I sometimes like being in front of the camera is stressful. I feel like I'm not. I feel like, and now that I'm about to say this out loud, I feel like it's probably me, um, judging myself a little harshly. But I feel like if I'm not in the right frame of mind, I'm just gonna come on here and be like, like, and I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want. Um, YouTube is hard. It's labor. You have to be writer, director, producer, and star. Yeah, yeah. I've just been trying to carve myself out this little corner in the media landscape, really, because I have that book I'm writing, which to me deals with all these same important themes, like I keep saying. Oh, and obviously I'm going to be spending a whole lot more time on that because I haven't touched it in a month. A month. And I am starting to get a little panicky about that, you know? So I'm going to see if I can't do maybe some freelance from home stuff, but that's hard to cobble together. I mean, frankly, I'm tempted to just go get a goddamn waitress job, but like retail around here pays 14 an hour. Uh, which is enough to save me up a down payment for a house I'd actually like to live in like 4 years. Unless I want to work full time at 14 an hour, which I can't do because I still have mom stuff to do. So, how exactly I'm going to cobble together this living, I don't know. Maybe I'll do at home freelance and some waitressing. I don't know. Out of curiosity, what do you guys do for a living? Does anybody feel like sharing what their job is? Be a fun little icebreaker. While we wait for another, like I say, about till that quarter till. Wow, yeah. Do you have a lot of craft farmers market? Probably in that we live in the, you know, kind of rural area in the hour surrounding a large tourist destination. So yes, probably. You can literally go work for Dolly Parton and earn $9 an hour. Dolly, come on, honey, what are you doing? I'm not talking high school kids either, although they do bus the high school kids from this town to Dollywood for summer jobs. Like they have a bus, a charter bus. I work as a collections manager, curator, conservator. Oh, that's awesome. At least I try to, because imposter syndrome. Hey, come on. I'm almost 5 years away from work, just ricked since my thyroidectomy. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that affects all your metabolism and everything, right? I do project management for a clinical research organization. That's cool. One of my side hustles for Extra Dough is user testing. Mm. Mm-hmm. See, I'm looking at stuff like that because really I am the side hustle for Extra Dough. Everything I make is extra for our family, for our household budget. So why is my hair sticking up just on the one side? Anyway, I would like to make, a decent part-time income and save that for a couple years, and that'll give us, down payment on a decent something around here because don't tell anybody, but real estate here still thinks it's 2005. Elections manager, curate, conservator. That sounds wicked, Alfalfa. Oh my goodness. How cool is that? Oh, I bet you had imposter syndrome. I bet you had to go to school for that, or you had to have some kind of degree for that, right? I used to be a medical device reprocessing technician at the hospital. Now I freelance with a radical collective doing stuff. I don't think it's best to say exactly what I do. Nice. Yeah, you craft mirrors on the side. That's right. You've told us about that a little bit. Hmm. The radical collective pays you? How the hell did you land that gig? Well, and of course, I don't have a whole lot of dedicated time to sell them at craft markets. Yeah, right. Not gonna lie, I've always dawdled with doing side hustle through my sewing and crafting, but I don't have the stamina to be an entrepreneur. Well, I think it's like any field, right? It does take a lot of work. Just about any field is going to take a lot of work, and it's like having a garden. Not everybody's a farmer, right? That shit's hard. That doesn't mean you can't have a garden. That doesn't mean it isn't totally legit to have a garden, right? People pay us to teach them how to do things, radical things. That's awesome. That's awesome. Uh, yeah, our one was getting ready to go into environmental science. She said the entire government agency that propelled the entire path of study that she was looking at disappeared overnight, basically. That's fun. I don't really know the full story, but so you go out there and teach people to do radical things, please, for the love of everything, because like this shit's really scary. And as far as me doing crafts, like it's not, you have to really pump those things out. Like uh, my mom used to do gem shows and craft shows and stuff for a little while. She made jewelry. I talked to a lot of people to do that. That's hard, and there's a lot of overhead that you have to cover. Immediately. There's no payments down the line. It's like, no, you reserve the booking, you reserve the booth, you reserve, in advance, and you hope you make that shit back that weekend. It's very immediate. I think if I had the time, I'd love to do a sewing craft YouTube TikTok. Oh, yeah. Yeah, do I have a lot of stories I could tell? Oh boy, I bet. And yet, you never think about putting those in a video, right? Because, well, wouldn't want to incriminate yourself, right? Yeah, and it seems like making a channel out of it would be an easier way, or just write a book about my projects. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and then, how do you promote the book? See, and that's my thing. I don't just want to write a book, I want people to read the book. That's my dream, is for people to have read the damn thing, right? Is to have a fairly wide readership. That's really the dream. Oh, yeah, there's a lot that goes into selling your own books. Fuck yeah. Oh, fuck yeah. Which, like, y'all remember, doubtless, like a decade ago when it was the new big thing where every fucking influencer had their own line of whatever. And then everybody was so shocked to find out that they were made by slave labor or that they were, just a mock up of some other product that already existed. And it's like, well, yeah. I don't know where y'all thought they were getting that stuff from. They didn't make it, they didn't have the time. But then I guess I don't really understand the makeup ecosystem. Are there really people out there who go on and on about remembering the iconic brand lipstick of whatever? Like, is that really a thing that they're hoping to make some mark on? You know? But, like I was going to say, making a YouTube channel about crafting or anything like that seems like it would be an easier way to, at the very least, get your stuff out there than, going to craft shows and stuff. But on the other hand, maybe not everybody prefers sitting in a room by themselves with a cat. Who is sleeping in the clean laundry? Because of course she is. Okay, about 5 more minutes. 5-minute warning, and we're gonna put on the this scary movie here. Because they want to leave a little time at the end to, discuss and decompress. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Like I say, I watched the first few minutes of it several times, trying to get this all up and running. And I'm gonna put in my little earphones so I can hear it. And yeah. And I'm kind of hoping that Joe or Belle are gonna show up before we start the movie. Like I said, that'd be good. Um, it doesn't look like the kind of thing you'd want to just dive into. Yeah, actually, yeah, our group was named in the Sitka report after using FOIA from CSIS, Canada's secret police, as being eco terrorists. So they've noticed you then. Congrats. The best not to go into more of what I do. Yeah. No, it's fine. It's fine. Um, it's nice to know that somebody out there is rabble rousing in that way, really. I wish there was more. I don't know. I just got done watching Kyle Kulinski talk about how the Morning Joe crew have like decided they're going to be chill with Trump and, journalistic integrity. And I just recently learned for a fact something that everybody else probably already knew, which is that in the lead up to the Iraq War in 2002, if you were a dissenting voice against that, you just got muzzled. You just got put off air. You just got locked in a closet. You just got shunted away. And I remember watching all of that and the lead up to all of that, the lead up to the war in Iraq, and just smelling a big rat. You wish there were more of it too? Yeah. And that's another reason I'm kind of easing back on this whole media thing for myself right now. It's because the landscape is just impossible to. I have lost my larger perspective, or what I thought I had. I thought I had some idea of what was going on. One flatters oneself that you do. And I feel like I've just really lost that in a lot of ways. It's the same now. Try advocate. Right. Yeah. No. But this is the president of the United States that they are either squelching or softballing criticism of, which, you know, the idea that you should be able to criticize our policy or foreign policy, yeah, you absolutely should, and that's fucked up, and I'm not shocked that they've been, suppressing that. But, because the idea that everybody in media is in lockstep over that, it's ridiculous. But, like, he sued a paper in Iowa for saying he didn't do well in a poll, and then they settled, apparently, and just paid him off. Which, like, if that was true, that's just you doing your job, and no judge in the world is gonna rule against you in that case. I don't know why you would settle that. So to just get buck on with business because they don't actually give a shit. So that's terrifying. Couple of minutes. Okay. And we'll make it a little bigger. We'll bring poor little baby down. Oh my god, you guys! I took this in to you know, my friend Jay's office the other day to have him help me fiddle with the software. He just goes, and he starts the video playing, and he just goes, "Why are they dropping those babies?" Like, so unfortunately, you're not gonna get my earnest, honest reaction to, like I say, the first few minutes because I've seen it 5 or 6 times now. But it does set a tone, so I have some idea of what we're in for, and it's I don't know. On the other hand, I'm so glad we're gonna get to watch all of this together. I'm so glad we're gonna get to watch it together because I was not looking forward to watching this by myself. Um. Okay. I forgot what we were gonna do. You're excited? Awesome. Okay. Boot. Make him a little bigger. We can actually see him. Poor little baby. Poor little baby. There we go. All right, everybody ready for this? Let's take it back. Let me know if the volume is high or low or make it bigger. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Bitch. Oh, all right. Okay, I'm gonna watch while working since I don't work. Yeah. Fair enough. All right. I really hope these earphones are connected. Please don't make me do anymore. If there is a devil in history, it is the power principle. Mikhail Bakunin. Bakunin. I don't know. But yeah. Okay, good.
Give me a baby, and I can make any kind of man. These are the words of John B. Watson, the founder of behaviorism.
It's working this out.
According to this worldview, the behavior of organisms, including human beings, is predictable and therefore controllable.
Yeah.
In 1920, at Johns Hopkins University, Watson experimented on several babies ranging in age from 3 months to a year. The experiments were remarkable in their simplicity. He would present a candle to infants to see if they were afraid of fire. He would introduce animals to their environment to see if the children were afraid of them naturally, or only after a traumatic experience.
Let's
He
get
would
turned
make a
up a little
hissing
bit.
noise and observe the results. Watson learned that newborn babies had no fear of the dark. He also learned, however, that such fear could be conditioned. And so it was with rabbits.
My face. Yeah.
This baby, known as Little Albert, initially found delight in touching a rabbit. Yet, as Watson began to clang a steel rod and claw a hammer behind the child's head whenever he touched the creature, the reaction became not one of delight, but terror. Soon, the mere sight of the rabbit would elicit fear, even when no noise was provided, a fear that also extended to objects and textures of a similar type.
Like, dude's a sociopath, right?
From his
What the fuck?
experiments, Watson reached a radical conclusion which would come to define political and social engineering in the 20th century. The driving force in society, he claimed, is not love, but fear.
Right, dude's a sociopath. If you feel no love, I guess you would believe that. Metanoia picture. Films. Sorry, presents. Stickball. No, whistle blues. Somebody's gotta go. Okay. Elites are sociopaths? Yeah. Yeah. And it's so interesting how, often culture seems to be set up to emulate them and their behavior. In association with I Am the Mob is an epic name, am I right? This is super honest. This clip right here definitely gives me the willies. A lot of them I think are supposed to look ominous out of context, and I mean, that one's kind of creepy. Imperialism is bad. A film by Scott Noble. And that's a sheep? I feel like we're watching a Nine Inch Nails music video right now. Are we gonna get closer to God? No, which one? Sorry. Yeah, this definitely feels like a 90s music video right now. Poor monkey. Oh, Vietnam! Okay. So we're drawing parallels between caged monkeys and Vietnam soldiers. Okay. I mean, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, why. Oh, have these clips been chosen? You know what I mean? Human replays. There is a phrase I've said a few too many times lately. It took us way too long to get here. I'm so sorry. If people do the right thing, they do not need to be retrained. L.J. Henderson.
You could speculate about why the rat was so useful. I mean, one thing, it reproduced really fast. Another thing is that people were not affectionate towards rats, so you didn't really need to worry about ethical objections unless something truly horrible was done. And finally, I guess you could see the rat as a metaphor for an animal that is tractable. Running a rat through a maze is a pretty understandable metaphor for most of us of running through life. And in fact, if you look at the history of the maze, it goes back through early Christian and even into Greek societies as kind of a metaphor for life. The idea that you somehow wind your way through a maze. Of course, in the Christian tradition, the maze is full of meaning and you're eventually trying to get to God. It's kind of a pilgrim's progress. Whereas in modern society, people like Nietzsche said that life was like a maze that you could never run to the end of. But in the 20th century, in American laboratories, the maze was once again adopted as a symbol of hope. Not a hope that one could get to God or get to a meaningful life, but the hope that people could actually be controlled in a very scientific manner that
I mean,
social
all the
life could
documentaries
be
from Billy
remade on the
Ross.
basis of
That's
scientific
okay.
principles.
I'm not worried about that. I mean, they did the best with what they had, you know.
In the roll call of scientific pioneers, few names will summon the passionate controversy as that which surrounds B.F. Skinner. His work has led to the formulation of the science of human behavior, which finds behavior to be predictable, therefore controllable. And for this, he has been both applauded and attacked. The science of behavior is based on the principles of operant conditioning. These principles and their practice have recently become known as behavior modification, sacrilege to some because it has to do with methods by which man can shape the behavior of others. But far from being a scheme to control people without their knowledge, it allows man to study and analyze behavior and to apply its healing potential to such fields as education, medicine, and psychology.
You should be, because they never had good
Behaviorism,
intentions.
as it
It will get
suggests, is the
into
study
all
of
that.
behavior. It's the notion that really
No,
all
I
that
mean the filmmakers
matters
did the best they
is
could with what they
behavior
had.
and
I
not the
mean,
thought processes that
can I
lie
turn it up just
behind
a little bit
behavior.
more?
And it also is very much a method of control.
I'm waiting for it to turn counterclockwise now.
But if you're saying the behaviorists never had best intentions,
And then I
yeah, these are
reinforce
people who
that
believe the
movement.
world is ruled by
In
fear. Yes.
behaviorism, there's the whole idea of behavior modification, where you can use various kinds of techniques to modify people's behaviors so that they stop doing what you don't want them to do and they start doing what you want them to do. So I think it's the scientific aspect of it and the controlling aspect of it that defines behaviorism.
The philosophy of behaviorism is deceptively simple. It suggests that organisms can be viewed as flesh and blood machines. Like machines, we require fuel. Like machines, we can be put to work for a specific cause. Like machines, we can be repaired or redesigned for new purposes. And like machines, we can be compelled into performing a certain action at the push of a button. The science of human behavior had always intrigued philosophers, but it wasn't until the Enlightenment and the era of capitalist industrialization that men began to think that they could control life forms in the same way they controlled objects.
Prior to that, when we think of the Middle Ages, even much of the Renaissance, the idea was that things were interrelated. They were organically a whole. In that sense, the Middle Ages had a lot in common with traditional peasant or folk cultures around the world. Things are seen as basically being a kind of giant web of influence. Everything was like a chain where if you plucked one part, the other part would resonate. That was the previous view, a worldview that had great advantages and also great disadvantages. With the scientific revolution in the 17th century, that view altered, in which things were seen as mechanical parts that interrelated. The mechanical philosophy of the 17th century was a very crucial step in the rise of capitalism, because capitalism does that. For example, it sees the earth at a distance. It sees the earth as something to be mined and exploited. It sees the earth as dead. So capitalism and mechanical philosophy went together very well. And that in many ways made possible the Industrial Revolution, the rise of modernity. And there again, we can say there are great advantages to it and also great disadvantages to it. Civilizations usually come as a package deal. There's a light side and a dark side. Every civilization believes in its own propaganda, so it tends to emphasize the light side and forgets about the shadows.
For the behaviorist, it started with plants. Julius Sachs at the University of Würzburg enumerated a set of tropisms, defined as any directed response by an organism to a constant stimulus. An example is the way an ivy plant will turn its leaves toward the window in order to gain exposure to sunlight. Sachs' protege, Jacques Loeb, took it to the next level by creating a stable of insects he called durable machines. In his laboratory at the University of Chicago, he trained cockroaches through the use of simple tropisms. Because of the insect's bilateral symmetry, a light shone on one side caused it to move in the other direction. In Russia, Ivan Pavlov moved on to animals. The term Pavlov dog has become synonymous with the conditioned reflex. Pavlov discovered that a dog would salivate when it began to associate a stimulus, such as a ringing bell, with food. In America, John B. Watson finally graduated to human beings.
John Watson was an extremely interesting character in the history of American social science and also the history of American advertising, which is a not insignificant connection between the two. His dissertation in 1906 was about the kinesthetics of the rat as it navigated a maze, and his idea was that he could remove one by one the senses of a rat, like remove its ability to see, remove its ability to hear, its ability to feel, and then see whether the rat could still make its way through a maze that it had been trained to navigate. So in his mind, rats were always stand-ins for human beings and human subjects. He called it psychology as the behaviorist views it, and it was basically his manifesto for behaviorism. And in it, he declared that behaviorism was a science of human behavior and that there was a method available to make a technology by which human beings could be shaped in any way that a scientist desired. Watson always was interested in control. One finds this theme throughout his work. He said, "Give me a baby and I can make any kind of man."
Watson continued to experiment on babies and other living things until his star began to fade. At the end of his life, he wrote nostalgically of his failure to put together what he considered the ultimate experiment in social engineering, a multi-ethnic baby farm. "I sometimes think I regret," Watson wrote, "that I could not have a group of infant farms where I could have brought up 30 pure-blooded Negroes on one, 30 pure-blooded Anglo-Saxons on another, and 30 Chinese on a third, all under similar conditions." Watson's dream may seem bizarre to modern ears, but implicit in the concept was a real desire to see the question of race answered once and for all. He was not unlike thousands of other researchers at prestigious universities across the United States.
In the late 19th century, alongside the rise of Jim Crow segregation in the 1890s, what you saw is that corporations developed a much more elaborate way to justify the fact that the wealthy corporate elite, which was without exception white, to explain the reason why. That reason has its basis in what became known as the eugenics movement. You were born with either good genes or not good genes.
I can hire one half of the working class and kill the other half.
In the
Jay
case of
Gould.
Miss Mason, I can see no reason for the operation that's been recommended. The girl is perfectly normal. She's hardworking and has a good reputation.
Do you know anything about her family background?
Oh, yes, Your Honor, I do.
There are several other children, aren't there?
Yes?
What is their condition?
One is a cripple. Two others might be classed as feeble-minded.
Isn't the oldest son in jail?
Oh, yes, I believe so.
And knowing all that, you still contend that this girl should be allowed to bring more people like that into the world?
Those who have good genes should be encouraged to reproduce, and those who are, quote, unfit should be discouraged from reproducing, from having children. That eventually went into forced sterilization programs, which started in the United States, directed against African Americans, Native Americans, immigrants in particular.
Eugenics was a pseudoscience rooted in the idea that you can, A, recognize pre-biologically
our sync is
determined
off.
differences in people
Sorry
based
about
on
that.
their ethnicity, and that B, you could construct a policy that favors some ethnic groups over others, both in terms of immigration policy and in terms of
Maybe if I pause it, let it
integration
catch up.
into.
Okay, I'm gonna pause it for a second and see if that sync will catch up. I don't understand why. Excuse me, our sync is off so bad. Leave that there for a second. So maybe Maybe we'll let it catch up. Huh? Okay, let's see if
U.S.
that does
society
anything.
based on this hierarchy of
No.
heredity. This pseudoscience, this philosophy, gained a lot of traction in the United States amongst the industrialist class, especially at a time when immigrant workers, who made up a large percentage, if not the majority of workers at the turn of the 20th century, were beginning to form unions, were beginning to create collective organizations, their own political parties, to challenge the conditions of industrialization, which were horrific and oppressive. It took root in the universities. It took root amongst the highest offices of government. Calvin Coolidge, for instance, Republican president, believed that, and even stated his belief that a lot of social problems were associated with inferior races. We see ultimately this philosophy is going to play an important role in shaping immigration policy after the passage of
My dad was
the
doing
Immigration Act of
genealogical research and
1924,
discovered our
which
family back in
essentially
Scotland
creates a
were used
national
in a
quota
familial
system
crime
that
study due to
favors
so many
immigrants
criminals in the
based
fam.
on their
Nice.
ethnicity and based on their
Nice.
nationality.
Yeah. My dad's lineage is not dissimilar to that. But you know, you want to talk about operant conditioning. It's funny how people will behave when living in a terrible environment, right? It pushes you towards things like criminality, you know. If the rules are stacked against you, you're more likely to break them. It's weird. I can't say we were ever included in a crime city, though. That was all after we came to the
One fact that
States.
is important to understand about the eugenics movement is that it was created and funded by the corporate elites that ruled America coming into the 20th century. It was the Rockefellers, the Harrimans, the Kellogg family of the cereal. They funded these research programs at universities. All of it created,
This all
funded
sounds very familiar,
by
right?
these corporate families. The Rockefellers, in particular, played a particularly devious role. As the eugenics movement developed, it went in a really horrible direction.
Gegen dieses Gesetz der natürlichen Auslese in den letzten Jahrzehnten furchtbar gesündigt.
Humans have transgressed the
Wir
law of
haben
natural
unwertes
selection.
Leben nicht nur
Not
erhalten,
only have we
wir
supported
haben
inferior
auch
life
Vermehrung
forms,
gewährt.
we've
Die
encouraged their
Nachkommen dieser
propagation, the
Kranken
offspring of these sick people.
sahen so aus.
I'm sorry, it was German. I shouldn't have been surprised at what they were saying. Blood is due to inheritance. Oh my god. I believe it wrong to operate to prolong an absolute crisis.
The Rockefellers would play a key role in the advancement of social engineering in the years between the Great Wars. Between 1922 and 1929, an Honor the Rockefeller Foundation gave out almost $50 million toward the pursuit of the social sciences around the world. According to historian Judith Sealander, the spur was a need for better organization in society at large. What had begun as a public relations ploy to assuage public anger in the face of unscrupulous business practices and violent suppression of working people, the Rockefeller Charities would set out to change society as a whole.
The Yale Institute of Human Relations was founded in 1929. It was given us $7 million initially from the Rockefeller Foundation, just a couple of months before Black Tuesday occurred in October of 1929. So according to my calculations, if you factor in all the money that Rockefeller eventually gave the Yale Institute and the other monies from the government, this was the largest social science project that's ever been funded in history.
At my job,
The
we are
desire
always
for better
reading many
order
board
was
posts, and I'm
epitomized
like,
in
what
the
the fuck?
Hawthorne experiments. which created a new model for organizing and supervising industrial workers. They are widely credited with putting the human factor back into industrial relations. Yet, as with previous experiments in the workplace, the ultimate effect would
Well,
be to increase the power
separate
of
the
the
art
great
from the
capitalists
artist, right?
at the expense of everyone else.
And that's what I think of when people talk about. Hang on. I don't want to talk over the movie. Only we're yeah. That's what I think of. When people are talking about like Neil Gaiman as a sex predator and like, can we still read Sandman? Oh, well, like you say, Henry Ford was a demon eugenicist, and you're still driving your car. So, I mean, it isn't just about separating art from bad artists. You know what I mean? So much worse than that. We're not
The
automatons.
story
We
of what
have
is now
eyes to
termed
see with.
scientific management, or Taylorism, begins decades earlier when Frederick Winslow Taylor was hired by Bethlehem Steel to increase efficiency in the industrial workplace.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, the greatest theorist of the free market, Adam Smith, had warned that division of labor would create a catastrophe for human society. Frederick Taylor disagreed. In Taylor's view, there was far too little division of labor. Factories could be run far more efficiently if tasks were mechanized and broken down even further. In a series of experiments, he set out to reduce every task
But Henry
performed in
Ford
a
didn't create
factory
art.
into
Yeah.
individual
No, but
units.
the creators of our culture and society are often, if not usually, terrible people. That's what I'm getting at, right?
Measuring how long they took and setting targets for workers to meet. On its surface, scientific management seems like an excellent idea. Increased efficiency allows more products to be manufactured in a shorter amount of time. Yet there was another, more sinister motivation lurking in the background. Ever since the 19th century, machine shops had been a bastion of skilled labor. What this meant was that a considerable degree of power remained concentrated on the shop floor. The same skills that made production possible also enabled machinists to challenge management when they felt they were being treated unfairly. For management, this was an unacceptable bargaining chip. For Taylor, it was simply inefficient.
You find that the man does not change very much, whatever else changes. They boast in the airplane world, it will take some other countries a generation to catch up with our quality. And it is not because their engineers are inferior, but because our ordinary workmen have a traditional skill behind them.
That music is so heartwarming, right? Oh, it's so cute.
Taylorism was certainly about de-skilling. It was about studying what skilled workers did to decompose those tasks into their basic elements and then teaching people to do specific
Decompose is
aspects
the
of
right
it
word, yeah.
without learning the entire set of or array of activities that were involved and are involved for a skilled person. In that sense, it's a mechanism of control because you dictate to people, well, you do this part of the entire task and you don't do anything else, and you dictate to 8, 10, or 12 people various specific aspects
And that's why
of the
assembly
task,
line work is
rather than allowing the
dehumanizing.
skilled person
Nice.
to decide how the
Yeah.
entire tasks should be done. So there's very much
Lovely.
control involved there. To the degree that this involves de-skilling and involves control, it tends to take power away from workers. It takes power away from,
De-skilling.
therefore, the
There's a new word
productivity
for
of
me.
workers, and therefore makes them less likely to be rebellious, makes them less likely to form various kinds of movements that would operate against, let's say, broadly the capitalist system.
Dumbing us down, yeah.
So this is
Yeah.
something that management thinks is a good idea for the workers, but is not a good idea for them. They have to be free to be creative. And in fact, Henry Ford, in his biography, said exactly that. Basically, he said something like, I'm too smart to have these kind of rational principles imposed on me, but those stupid workers out there we need to impose those principles on them because they wouldn't know what to do if we didn't impose those principles on them. So rationalization, McDonaldization is always something that those on the top want to
McDonaldization?
impose
Nice.
on the bottom, but something they don't want to affect their work at all.
Because it's miserable.
In fact, invented the automobile assembly line and more generally the system that came to be known as Fordism. One aspect of Fordism
Sinister and soul-crushing, yeah.
with hierarchical control over workers, and more specifically, the control over workers by the assembly line. So all a worker might do, for example, is put a hubcap on a car as that car went past as it was being constructed on the assembly line. So instead of a thinking, creative, skilled worker, you had a kind of mindless kind of worker who repetitively did the same task over and over again. Well, that kind of worker is robot-like. You are forced into a series of robot-like actions. The most interesting thing for me about
That was Charlie Chaplin.
Or Weber's broader concept,
Also a notoriously terrible person.
Rationality of rationality. That these rational systems inevitably spawn all sorts of irrational consequences. This is supposed to be an efficient system, yet it ends up being very often inefficient. It's dehumanizing, one of the kind of ultimate irrationalities from my point of view.
In their study, Where Have All the Robots Gone?, Harold Shepard and Neil Herrick confirmed what many had long suspected. People trapped in an unrewarding work life were not only more likely to be dissatisfied, but were also more likely to suffer from low self-esteem, a feeling of helplessness, alienation, and to be plagued by a variety of mental disorders. The workers, who were the most dissatisfied and whose mental health was the most impaired, were the least likely to vote or participate in community organizations.
If you work in an environment where you're beaten up all the time, well, you're beaten up. Moreover, if you work in an environment that is so fragmented, that so robs you of dignity and so robs you of the expression of your own capacities, then they'll be diminished. You'll be deadened. You'll be bored. You will be reduced.
See, and I want to point out that as far as all elites being sociopaths, they had to dehumanize us in their own minds first. They had to come up with science to convince themselves that these lower people on the social ladder were actually less human first. Which is actually a hopeful thing for me. That's hopeful to me, okay? Not all of those people are completely irredeemable, right? I don't believe that, for at least this reason. It's the same thing you have to do to soldiers in war to make them go out and kill people they've never met. It's a psychological trick.
Potentials, and you are not too likely to take initiative in other domains either. This is why Taylorism is pursued. This is why fragmenting of work is pursued. It weakens the workers, not just on the job, but in their communities too, which is what you want to do so that they don't take more of the income from themselves, thus reducing profits for the elites. So it's a perfectly sensible policy, a perfectly sensible approach, a devil's approach, but a perfectly sensible approach from the
devil's approach, yeah, right?
Trying to stay there.
Damn, sometimes I wish I believed in that shit, just so I could go around accusing all these insane,
so it's not even really
destructive shit.
What you'd have to do is to create a new kind of economy in which these situations and these conditions don't restrict our options.
It's gonna be so convenient.
The corporate,
they think they're God and they see us as ants. Yeah, no, some of them do. Some of them do. Some of them do think like that. The most dangerous ones, probably.
Why? Because it drives toward profit regardless of the broader implications. It doesn't matter if your drive toward profit induces pain and suffering, promotes, generates black lung disease in a mine, or pollutes the environment, or literally destroys the society. It doesn't matter. You're forced by the nature of the social relations inside and among corporations, the market system, to pursue, to accumulate, to pursue profits.
Right, because capitalism is for capital, not people.
If hierarchy is the defining characteristic of scientific management, it should not be surprising that it was met with great praise, not only by the capitalist world, but by fascists and authoritarian communists.
Ah, that
Mussolini
explains
set up a
that.
propaganda arm of his government to promote Taylorism, while Lenin wrote in Pravda in 1918 that we must introduce in
Meritocracy.
Russia the study and the teaching of the Taylor system and its systematic trial and adaptation. As in America, workers in Russia were unimpressed with scientific management. A major contributing factor to the Kronstadt Rebellion of 1921 was the introduction of Taylor's techniques. Immediately after the rebellion was crushed, a government document on rationalization spoke of the instinctive mistrust of all workers toward all kinds of experiments directed at extracting greater productivity from them. Workers at
Well,
Kronstadt
yeah.
had envisioned a decentralized system where they would actually own and control their own work and resources, but Lenin had something different in mind. Socialism, Lenin wrote, is merely state capitalist monopoly, which is made to serve the interests of the whole people and has to that extent ceased to be capitalist monopoly. The new means of control have been created not by us, but by capitalism in its military imperialist stage.
Sir?
The Leninist system was one of the greatest blows that socialism suffered in the 20th century, maybe second only to fascism. I mean, as Lenin took power, among its first acts, along with Trotsky, were to destroy the socialist institutions that had arisen in the pre-Bolshevik period. Soviets, factory councils, constituent assembly, which was dominated by left social revolutionaries, largely peasant-based. And of course, they went to war against the anarchists, a major war to try to wipe them out, Makhno's army and so on. And there was a sort of a logic behind it. They were orthodox Marxists, unlike Marx, incidentally. They believed in a version of Marxism that said that revolution can't come in a backward peasant society, which is what Russia was. It was what we would now call a third world country, an undeveloped peasant society with some development, but owned by the West and so on. I mean, a highly educated and productive intellectual class, but that's also true of third world societies. So they thought this couldn't happen. So therefore we have to drive this backward population through industrialization by force. And then later on, by the iron laws of history and so on and so forth, will come the socialism. Of course, it's all
The iron
nonsense,
laws
but,
of history.
so they essentially laid the basis
Love
for
that.
a totalitarian system with an ideological doctrine behind it. When the Soviet Union collapsed, I actually wrote an article saying this is a victory for socialism, small victory for socialism. I just couldn't get it published. Nobody knew what I was talking about. The world's two major propaganda systems, the West and the Soviet Union, they both determined to use the word socialism to refer to the totalitarian system of the Soviet Union. I mean, the West did it to discredit socialism. The Bolsheviks did it to try to gain, the credit associated with genuine socialism. Well, when the world's two propaganda systems agree, it's going to be very hard for people to extricate themselves from it. So now socialism the term has been degraded to mean the form of totalitarianism instituted by Lenin, carried through by Stalin. And it was, going back to Spain, it was entirely natural that they should be in the lead in destroying the popular revolution. Bakunin, much earlier, had predicted all of this. He said that in the future, it will be two forms. One form will be they'll take over the state, and they'll create a red bureaucracy, which will be the most vile and brutal regime the world's ever seen. And there are others who will understand that they can't take over the state, so they have to serve concentrated private power and state power. And they'll be the technical intelligentsia who, implement the policies of the masters in what we now call liberal democracies, which is a very good prediction. It's one of the few predictions in the social sciences that actually came true, which is one of the reasons why nobody ever studies it. It's much too dangerous and too insightful.
In both the Soviet Union and the United States,
what was his name?
ruling
Buchanan?
elites would set out to master the psyche of the average worker, and from the Hawthorne experiments came new insights. Researchers found that the very act of allowing workers to talk about their feelings reduced the possibility of agitation and rebellion. It made workers feel as if they mattered, even if the social relations remained fundamentally the same.
The Hawthorne experiments, initially it was to be a purely scientific study, and science tries to get rid of unnecessary things. Let's make everything equal so there aren't any other factors than the ones we're controlling for. So they were trying to see what effect changing the lighting would have on how workers felt, and also how
Doing the important work as always.
It wasn't any really quality concern, but quantity of production and worker satisfaction, which will ultimately affect the quantity of work as well. But to do that, well, we don't want to have employees being disgruntled about this and that being a factor. So we will discuss with the employees what we are going to do. There were complete discussions, and the employees would suggest trying this and trying that. And what they found was, no matter what changes they made, including putting the lighting back to where it had been before the experiment began, to see what difference that made. Every time they made a change, having discussed it with employees, production went up and employee satisfaction went up. Now, if it had been done in a democratic context, immediately the reaction would have been, let's look at the participation. But this was done in a hierarchical context. So what came out of it was a public relations school, industrial relations developed out of it. And most of that meant was taken as a way of trying to control employees by trying to manipulate them ideologically. Not that managers hadn't done that before, but now there was a whole school of doing that. I would say the wrong lesson was learned. Yeah, put out a suggestion box so that employees can feel they're being asked, but you don't necessarily pay any attention to it. In a real teamwork organization or a participatory organization, employees get to take each other into account. They begin caring about each other. I've seen this going into a plant and seeing it develop over time, the amount of participation increase, and the attitudes of employees begin to grow, and the care that people have about each other. And then that can easily expand to care about the community. And also, work can be reorganized because people have a say. There are better ways to do things. If we are treated better, we'll work better, and so forth. Now, the broader social impact of doing these kinds of things, as we've seen earlier, hierarchical control makes people feel worse about themselves. It creates more mental illness, creates bad relations outside the workplace. Well, if people spend most of their time in a collaborative workplace, they become more collaborative. They care more about it.
Wait, I want to highlight that. Hierarchical control makes everything worse. Here's a thesis statement for you.
You can have a democratic corporation, a worker-owned business, and a worker-owned business that really is managed by the workers, that uses the corporate form. And that gives us some hope because it's possible, at least theoretically, to reform corporations.
Participatory economics is the name for a different way to do the economy. It's a different approach to accomplishing production, consumption, and allocation, economic functions, different than what? Different than capitalism, and different than what went under the name socialism, but I tried to describe as coordinatorism, as this class of engineers and managers and doctors and lawyers being at the top. So participatory economics, econ is an alternative to all of that. It's a different kind of economy. In a participatory economy, in a good economy, instead of organizing economic
Hey Joe, how you
keep
doing?
a small sector of people on top and to enrich them beyond any sensibility, and to utilize productive apparatus even when it entails doing things that are a complete waste of time, building missiles that'll never be used, and on and on and on. Instead of all that, we would produce and distribute for purposes of human fulfillment and development. You don't need all the advertising, you need sensible information rather than people competing with advertising that has nothing to do with actually communicating what the benefits and costs of production are. You don't need all this military production, of course not. You don't need, nor do you want to, generate all kinds of
Hanging in there.
activity and
Right on.
product, which doesn't make people better off.
Glad to hear it. Imagine a system that could actually work for us.
As workers around the globe continue to struggle for workplace democracy and equal rights, mass production continues apace. Taylorism, combined with human relations, make up the cornerstones of worker management in the 21st century. In China, scientific management has taken on nightmarish proportions. So extensive is the division of labor that millions of people are forced to perform roughly the same motion thousands of times a day. In the United States, workers in some assembly plants are required to be in continual motion for up to 57 seconds a minute. In Indonesia, sweatshops owned by corporations like Nike chart productivity down to 1,000th of a second. In offices and service industries, corporations are increasingly resorting to video surveillance and computerized monitoring. One of Frederick Taylor's descendants, John Taylor Gatto, has rebelled against his forebears' legacy. An award-winning teacher, he has also rebelled against the state of his profession.
Education is what remains after one has forgotten everything he learned in school, said Albert Einstein.
The key is the word compulsion. The idea of drawing all children, all young people, into some universal program administered by the leader or the leaders is as old as Plato, probably older. But nowhere on earth was that able to be imposed until Northern Germany, under the military rule of the Prussians, finally imposed that in 1818, so in the second decade of the 19th century. That is the first time. It was announced in other places, but never was it able to be successfully administered, because the idea is so crazy and so damaging inherently that people simply disobeyed the law. The experience of Prussian Germany was that it was possible to convert sovereign human beings into human resources. That's a translation of the German compound. And that by making these people incomplete, making them unable to think in contexts, but they could be converted into specialist tools for management, scientific management. Horace Mann was hired by the railroad and coal interests of New England to bring about compulsion. He had no interest in schooling. He was an ambitious young politician. He did get compulsion laws passed in 1852. Once it was in Massachusetts, it spread very, very slowly. It wasn't for 15 more years that another state followed suit. So it hardly was a gift to the populous portion of America. I smile a little bit when I say that, because the mythology is that it was greeted everywhere with great enthusiasm.
Not only did parents resist compulsory schooling, they sometimes did so violently. So vehement was the opposition in Barnstable on Cape Cod that state militia were brought in to march children to school under armed guard. A primary reason why the mass of the American population resisted compulsory schooling was a widespread belief that its purpose had little to do with education and everything to do with control. Their suspicions were well founded. An undercurrent of class warfare runs through early American education documents. The U.S. Bureau of Education Circular of Information for April 1872 explains that inculcating knowledge teaches workers to be able to perceive and calculate their grievances, thus making them more redoubtable foes in labor struggles. Such an enabling is bound to retard the growth of industry. 16 years later, in the report of the Senate Committee on Education, is equally explicit. We believe that education is one of the principal causes of discontent of late years, manifesting itself among the labor.
So wait, do we want them to disband the Department of Education? I'm trying to bring it back to the present. Anybody who's here in the United States. I'm not even sure exactly how much I feel like they've made a move on that because I saw something about it and I need to look into it and oh my god.
Classes.
The first Red Scare, in my judgment, is the trigger event for the embedment of compulsion schooling in the United States. The Red Scare of 1848 is probably the reason that one American state fell under the compulsion regimen. There are literally thousands of books from the period 1880 to, say, 1920, roughly, that deal with how you scientifically engineer a factory or a church congregation or young people in school. School which followed a general outline of converting kids into obedient tools now took on a very, very mechanistic aspect under this surge of scientific engineering.
In 1903, the Atlantic Monthly called for adoption of scientific management in schools. Prominent education
But you
theorist
have to
William C.
realize that they
Bagley
don't teach
stressed the
critical
need for
thinking. They teach
unquestioned
kids
obedience.
how to pare
The
it
new
back.
system
Oh, I
would train
know.
children for
I know
life in
that. And
20th century
I told
America.
our older ones are
Their role, to fulfill the needs of
informed,
commerce,
when they
industry,
start complaining, why do we have to go so early, blah,
In the
blah, blah.
communities
Well,
with the best education, more shoppers, more merchandise moving, a higher average of per capita sales. In the other community, fewer shoppers. Maybe things will look up in the long run. In the first community, there's a larger magazine circulation per 1,000 population. A much smaller circulation in the second community, a decline in demand. The student of typing, shorthand, and business machines becomes a producer upon graduation, a tax-developed community asset. He prepares for radio and electronics. His future promises a profit on the taxes invested in him. As education raises the cultural level, so it must also introduce youth to the know-how of production and stir interest in precision, efficiency, and service. With graduation, the community receives a new supply of young people who want a better life on the one hand and who have the ability to work for it on the other. Now the tax investment returns to the taxpayer.
In order to aid in the process, the Gary Plan was introduced. It had a new organizational scheme in which different subjects would be taught by different departments. Similar to the breaking down of factory jobs under Taylorism, students would be herded from classroom to classroom in order to digest a stream of standardized factual information. Like Pavlov's dogs, they would do so at the ring of a bell.
Children, go where I send thee. Where will you send me? I'm gonna send me one by one. I want but a little bit, a baby, I want by the Virgin Mary. Born in Bethlehem. Children, go where I send thee. Where will you send me?
The first lesson I saw was the terrible confusion that's in any school as people race about at bell-marked intervals. The time-honored experience of mental development is that it occurs with strong concentration, not with fragmented attention, class position. You will not find the doctor's son, however ignorant he is, in the class with the marginalized kids. Indifference is wonderful. This is a factory to create indifference to intellectual things, to ideas. They have to be whipped, ordered, and disciplined to do anything. Or, just as bad, they have to be offered bribes to do it. Emotional dependency, sure. Probably half of these 60 million kids who attend school in the United States, removed from their own families at a very vulnerable age, become emotionally dependent on a pat on the head, a smile, avoiding an insult. Intellectual dependency. In spite of rhetoric to the contrary, a teacher's nightmare is invested in those kids, if any, who actually have learned how to think for themselves.
Okay, I'm going to stop it here again because, we're talking about applying critical thinking and everything, right? Because, yeah, on the one hand, it can and has been used this way. Excuse me. But on the other hand, having all of these extra resources gives you the opportunity to study things that one might not encounter in one's own little corner of the world by yourself, right? Not to mention the ability to discuss it and kind of digest it along with a lot of other people, or at least maybe, a few other people. And the kid who actually learns to think critically and actually is good at digesting this stuff and is engaging with it actively is a problem because of the industrialization of it, right? Because, yeah, we're worried about efficiency. We're worried about productivity. Is that the profit motive? Something like that. It's another thing that's spoiled by the profit motive. Is that where I'm going with this? I think so.
The teacher's job is not only to convey bits of information that should not be challenged, but also to convey how you connect those bits of information, but not practice in doing that for yourself. You memorize someone else's connection.
What is a circle? Billy Handler. A circle is a closed curve in which all endpoints
Problem
on
is
the
the school itself and
circumference
how
are
it's
equal
about,
distance from the
how it's
circle point.
structured.
Very good.
Provisional
And
self-esteem, this really ties into the grades, the test scores, the signs of approval by the teacher. You're allowed to feel good about yourself if an authority issues a signal that you can do that. On the other hand,
that's called being a child, friend. And see, I didn't want to maybe say this, but I can't help myself. He did not like school, right? This guy hated school, right?
if the authority condemns you, the only way you can feel good about yourself is to become an outlaw.
Yeah, that guy didn't like school. That's okay. I didn't either. But it's not all bad. Even for me, it wasn't. Wow.
What are
He's
you
a
trying to
teacher.
do? If our goal is to help kids become critical thinkers, lifelong learners who really
I stand by what
enjoy
I said.
thinking and reading and playing with numbers and ideas, if we want to help them become good learners and good people who can create and sustain a functioning democracy, then education would look very different from the way it looks right now, at least in our culture. We would have to question the use of grades. What research finds is that when kids are trying to get good grades in school, three things tend to happen. They begin to lose interest in the learning itself. Now the purpose is just to get a good grade, rather than
Playing
to
my jam,
engage
this
with
mortal
the question
coil.
or
Is that the
problem
song
at
that's
hand.
playing right now?
Second, they tend to think less deeply and retain knowledge for a shorter period of time compared to kids who don't have any grades. And third, they tend to pick the easiest possible tasks. That's not because they're being lazy, it's because they're being rational. If we tell kids we want to see a better report card, we want to see higher grades, naturally they'll pick the shortest book or the easiest project because that maximizes the chance of achieving that goal. So regardless of what your goal is, if you're interested in assessing kids,
There's a
and
YouTube
teachers
channel
and
that
schools
uses one of my
to see,
favorite
are we
songs
doing a
from
good
my
job here,
playlist in their videos
you
a
would
lot,
never
and it
need
always catches my ear.
tests
It's so
in
weird.
order to see whether kids are
It's called
learning and where they need
Candles.
help, and you would never need grades to report the results of the evaluation we place on those assessments. We would certainly do away with standardized testing, the kind of testing used in particular states or provinces where everyone takes the same test and then you compare everyone's scores. These tests tend to measure what matters
Who's that by?
It tends to be a good marker for family income because what standardized tests mostly measure is the size of the houses near a school. But it's the case that some of our deepest thinking kids just don't do well on tests. And some kids who get great scores have never
that's the
had an
band.
original idea
Okay.
in their lives.
Well, I thought you just judged by tests.
Oh, no. There are many other things besides tests that we use. Of course, we do consider a child's general ability and the way he scores on standardized tests, but that's not all.
So, John Cleese.
Competition builds character. In fact, what we find is that by any reasonable notion of character in terms of psychological health or self-esteem, that competition undermines that and creates a kind of neurosis because we come to think of ourselves as good and competent only to the extent that we have defeated other people. And so we're always playing this desperate king of the mountain game where we're all worried about triumphing over other people and stepping on their faces and looking at them as if they're going to step on our faces. That has two effects. One is it's horrible for us in terms of psychological development because there's a perpetual sense of disease and anxiety. But second, it very logically has a destructive effect on our relationships. We compete because we're raised that way, not because we're born that way. I mean, take, for example, the belief in survival of the fittest, which is seen as a Darwinian notion. In fact, Charles Darwin never even used the phrase survival of the fittest. That was coined by a right-wing social thinker in the 19th century named Herbert Spencer, who tried to corrupt Darwin's thinking to his own reactionary political purposes. What Darwin talked about was natural selection, which means that the individual organism that's best able to adapt to a changing environment is more likely to be around to survive and reproduce. But that doesn't specify competition as a mechanism. In fact, often the active avoidance of competition, if not the deliberate pursuit of cooperative strategies, turns out to make it more likely that organisms and entire species will survive. The research consistently shows that competition not only isn't necessary for excellence, but tends to impede excellence on most tasks. And the more challenging the task, the more ingenuity, problem-solving skill it requires, the more competition tends to disrupt that achievement. Excellence pulls in one direction and competition pulls in another. And in fact, another kind of research study corroborates that. If you take a whole bunch of people and give them a task to do, some kind of problem to work out, and half of them are told, see if you can figure out how to do this task. And the other half are told, this is a contest with a prize to whoever wins, whoever does the best job. Study after study after study across cultures, across gender, across ages, find that the people who compete, who have to compete, end up doing an inferior job on that task. At the moment, it appears as though much of what happens in schools in North America is really for the convenience of people who have most of the power. There is, if anything, an active discouragement of critical questioning. Corporations claim they want kids who are able to think outside the box, but only so far as they're caught within a larger box that works to the advantage of the free market, which means that the market economy, based on competition, based on economic rather than human considerations, ends up controlling the system.
Today, many people assume that antisocial and even violent behavior by young people is a completely natural phenomenon. Yet anthropological studies reveal this to be a myth. Our widespread use of the term juvenile delinquency exposes not only the failure of modern schooling, but of an important concept given expression by the behaviorists. They called it the frustration-aggression hypothesis.
Venting, right? Fear is the parent of cruelty.
The
Okay.
frustration-aggression hypothesis
Wait.
is an attempt.
Again, let's go back a bit. At the beginning, they said these people believe that the society is ruled by fear. Yikes.
By behaviorists at Yale to combine their own science of behavior with that of the Freudians. Simply put, when people perceive that they are being prevented from achieving just rewards, their frustration is likely to turn to aggression.
Yep.
This study by the behaviorist Hobart Maurer showed that when rats could not achieve their expected reward, they began to take out their frustrations on each other. The scientist notes that two animals which have lost their hold on the pellet, frustration, will be seen to turn on each other, displaced aggression. Similarly, in a 1941 experiment, toys were placed behind a wire screen where children could see but not touch them. When they eventually gained access to the toys, their play became considerably more destructive. On the one hand, human beings are not rats. Armed with the necessary information, we can come to a logical conclusion about who is to blame for our frustrations in life. Rightly or wrongly, we often point the finger squarely back at ourselves. Yet in the hands of politicians and demagogues, frustration-aggression can be a potent tool in deflecting anger onto scapegoats.
They want to throw white children and colored children into the melting pot of integration, out of which will come a conglomerated, mulatto, mongrel class of people.
We are the Ku Klux Klan. We hate niggers, we hate Jews, we hate faggots, and we hate spicks.
We kill the faggots, we kill the lesbians. I said, God damn it, we kill them all. Why kill the elder crackers? The old crepit crackers in South Africa. How in the hell you think they got old? They got old oppressing and killing black people.
I'm not going to discuss it. If he says murder gets murdered, if a murderer gets murdered or slain, capital punishment, that's fine with me. Line them up and we'll clean up our nation overnight. Start with the abortionists. Might as well get rid of a few of those beasts.
I'm so sick of them! I'm so sick of the brainwashing about Islam and Muslims and the Quran. Shove it! Shove it all! I'm sick of it! Take the music off. These throwbacks think they're better than you underneath it all, and 90% of them are on welfare. Speak it out at the supermarket. Tell them what you think of Islam. Tell them what you think of Muslims.
We're talking about illegal immigration. So now, in addition to venereal disease and the other leading exports of Mexico, women with mustaches and VD, now we have swine flu. And when you scoop up some of the world's lowest of primitives in poor Mexico and drop it down in the middle of the United States, poor, without skills, without language, not sure our culture, not sure our
hang in there,
haven't been vaccinated. Look at all the things we take for granted.
We'll make it.
It's millions of leeches from a primitive country come here to leech off you.
I don't know what happened tonight, and I don't know why.
Also, the gay agenda and Harry Potter.
Professors, the 101 most dangerous academics in America, and that's just a short list of the 40,000 of them. They're like termites that have worked into the woodwork of our academic society, and it's appalling.
Scapegoating, and the hope is that by deflecting the anger of people, which might be directed against the system itself, deflecting the anger against these other people,
the system would save itself. In the South, the black people became scapegoats, and you directed the anger of white people. Poor white people in the South were the people who joined the Ku Klux Klan. These poor white people might have rebelled against the governments of the South and against the national government, but no, they were told that black people were the source of their problem.
He entered the facility heavily armed, immediately started shooting everybody.
It was a local man dressed in battle fatigues who declared, "I have killed 1,000, I'm gonna kill 1,000 more." 41-year-old James Huberty reportedly walked into the restaurant carrying a semi-automatic rifle and 2 other weapons, enough ammunition to last 2 hours. Witnesses inside said he fired wildly into the unsuspecting crowd gathered for a quick evening meal. He fired through windows, hitting people in the street. He fired at men, women, children, and babies.
Bullets fly, leaving a local family scared to be in their own home. Tonight, investigators say hate was driving the man who pulled the trigger.
Deputies say last month someone opened fire on the Hashims because they're Muslim.
I need to know who hates us that much, who wants us to die.
Authorities in California are urging Jewish schools and temples to stay alert following a shooting at a synagogue in L.A.
The attack happened in the same area of
Scapegoating.
Where another Hispanic
Talking about
immigrant was
scapegoating.
Vera left a food pantry here at his church in Lower Manhattan, carrying his groceries. He biked across the Williamsburg Bridge and into Bushwick, where police say he was allegedly struck in the head, then thrown off his bike as 3 black males yelled anti-Mexican slurs.
On the left-hand side of your screen, you can see the 2 attackers shove and punch Jack Price, the openly gay victim, now in a medically induced coma. The attack accelerates, with both suspects flailing their arms at the helpless 49-year-old.
There was utter pandemonium outside the university building as ambulances carted away the injured. Police have now confirmed 14 students dead, all women. Another dozen people were hurt, caught in a rampage that witnesses called a human hunt, with the gunman yelling, "I want women."
Reportedly, my dad got kicked out of the KKK for accidentally
There's
killing
an
a
interesting
white
perspective that
Sorry.
comes out of many studies in psychiatric anthropology.
Can't
which
have that.
suggests that mental illness is not just a standardized, invariant thing like diabetes, for example. Diabetes is always the same wherever you are in the world, but mental illness seems to take different forms. Once a person takes leave of reality, once a person abandons the ship of fools, the form that the psychosis takes is often dictated or at least shaped by the dominant culture. Thus, for example, in traditional Ojibwe society, where there was a belief that once a person went insane, this is the Wendigo psychosis, that he or she might eat human flesh. And thus a proportion of people who, feeling that they've left reality, no longer feeling control, begin to act out the particular form of psychosis that their culture is aware of. Multiple murderers tend to differ from conventional single murderers. The ordinary murderer is very
So you go
uniform
crazy
everywhere
the
in
way you
industrial
expect
world.
to go
He's,
crazy?
Very much a bottom of the working class figure. He's addicted to drugs or alcohol. He has no education or professional qualifications. This is the sort of person who, in a fit of rage, kills a friend or a lover. Multiple murders are a little different. They tend to be more edging towards the middle class in their origins and in their aspirations. And a part of their agenda, of their motivation, is that they devoutly wish to join a higher class but come to feel excluded. In the case of James Huberty, the mass murderer who killed more than a dozen people in that long siege at the McDonald's in San Diego, Huberty used to stare from his apartment across the street at McDonald's, which was filled with Mexican immigrants who were seizing control of this fundamental institution, he thought, of American society, who were able to go there and afford to eat when he couldn't. I tried to argue in a succession of books that These kinds of killers, while their acts are deranged and insane, what they themselves are not necessarily so. Rather, they are alienated individuals who wish to end their life in a way that allows them to release their grudge against society for their perceived exclusions. Multiple killers may be statistically rare, but I've tried to argue that they represent central cultural themes. They embody many of the main ideas in their culture. Not only the glorification of violence and manly vengeance.
I just heard a Wilhelm
worldly
scream,
success
and that was
worldly
super
ambition.
distracting. I just want to say, whoever designed
They
the
feel they've been
sound
foiled.
design for this film
So
could
they're
have
a
left the
prime
Wilhelm out of it.
embodiment
That
of
was
their
really distracting.
civilization, not a twisted derangement of it. I've also
Yeah.
tried to argue that this fundamentally
Kitty Cat agreed.
rebellious
Hey, Belle!
revolutionary cast to what
How
they're
you doing?
these ghastly killings they perpetrate,
You
are
came in at a great
relatively
moment.
ignored by government institutions charged with regulating society. They typically pay much more attention to real political dangers, and spend much less time and energy and money monitoring this small group of killers. I don't believe personally that the answer to psychopathy is to be found in brain-altering chemicals to change the nature of our society in that artificial way. I think what we ought to start doing is teaching people about the dignity and value and the sacredness of human life, and teaching people how to behave towards one another. The important thing to understand, however, is while it's interesting to look into the nature of modern society and see its fissures and fractures and stresses through multiple murderers, it should not be considered that these are the primary killers. Governments and politicians are the main killers. Indeed, some scholars have argued that...
Or corrupt insurance companies, am I right?
The state's primary function is, as mass murderer, to wage war on other states, and that was how they developed. That's the
I think Americans
social
take for
impetus
granted how much the Americas were built on
the development of the
not
modern
liking
state.
people.
So it's kind of disturbing. We don't think of the state in that way, but that's what it is. Hitler and Stalin, between them, killed something like more than 100 million peoples, many of them their own peoples. The small-time personal...
I'll have to watch this one again. My attention span and going outside to smoke is just a lot. Yeah, no, you should though, and I'm gonna have to echo. I'm gonna have to echo Kitty Cat's sentiment. It's definitely worth a watch. I've actually taken a couple of notes here, you know, for like further investigation and development. It's just interesting stuff.
Killers are governments.
Nowhere is frustration aggression more apparent than in modern-day military training. In her study of Japanese atrocities in China, Iris Chang observed that Japanese troops were subjected to particularly severe abuse prior to their deployment. They were repeatedly slapped for no reason, humiliated in front of their peers, and reduced to a state of impotent rage. It was generally at this point that they would be given a bayonet and instructed to attack the enemy, who was portrayed as a subhuman animal. In America, the same techniques would be adopted, with the emphasis less on physical abuse than verbal.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Good, Rick. I knew it would be. I knew it would be. I didn't want to watch this by myself. That was a good point. I hadn't thought about that. Really.
You understand? Yes, sir! Get off my bus right now!
They're scared. That's pretty much what it boils down to. You have a
Plus, you know, I love you guys, but I'm not going to sit here and just make myself miserable for y'all's entertainment. If I hated it, if I was truly miserable, I would turn that shit off. No, this is interesting.
recruit that has no idea what the Marine Corps is about.
Is that what the Marine Corps is about?
It's that initial shock to let them know that this isn't a summer camp, this isn't where people are coming to have a good time, that we got a real job down here, and that's making United States Marines.
If it were deadly serious, it'd be really funny, right?
I mean, we used to live on dirt roads, and we used to wear sandals most of the time, or humble. We used to probably wash our same clothes 2 or 3 times a week, because that's basically pretty much what we had. I wanted people to see that know, this is where I come from, and look at me now. I'm a Marine. I come from the poor side of
More
town, you know,
reminders of
so
why I
if
don't
anybody
blindly
else
support
could
the
maybe have a
troops. Oh
small,
yeah.
you know, some type of motivation
Well,
for
I don't
my little
think people
brothers or
should
my little
blindly support
cousins,
anything.
something they could look forward to.
Light them all up. Come on, fire. Yeah, roger. Keep shoot. Keep shoot. Bushmaster 2-6. Damage, Kyle. All right. I hit him. All right, you're clear. All right, I'm just trying to find targets again.
Frustration aggression is one of the most effective ways of managing a population. By directing a person's rage against selected minorities or outside enemies, the true cause of an individual's frustration.
Okay, hang on a minute. I gotta use the bathroom anyway. Hang on. Okay. Oh, sorry, I wasn't ready for that. Oh my god. Oh, did I put these in right? Yeah, okay. Sorry, I feel like that's the first actual murder we've seen. Am I wrong about that? Am I wrong about that? Oh my god. Okay, sorry.
Effectively diverted. Yet in many ways, the theory is a symptom of something deeper. In order to engender real hatred against a particular group, that group must first be feared. And it is in the realm of fear that behaviorism made its most disturbing contribution.
That's what they believe in. That makes sense. Imagine making that sign. Imagine being the guy who made that sign. Experimental neurosis emoji. Thanks. Yeah, hugs right back to everybody. Hugs to everybody.
He's
This
called
is...
a neo-behaviorist, and he trained at the Yale Institute of Human Behavior. And he was quite unusual. I think his background was unusual, and he was also an unusually perceptive and sensitive man. And one of the first and most significant experiments he did was called a preparatory set, in which he had a human being lie down, or usually it was a student, lie down and be attached to electrodes that would deliver a shock whenever a light went on. And then so he would shine the light and then shock the student. And at that point, several people elected to discontinue the experiment. But those who persisted, he would then vary the experiment by showing the light and then not shocking them, or showing the light and shocking them. He would sort of make it unpredictable. And he discovered that people's state of anxiety and fear actually increased when the shock didn't come, when they were just waiting for a shock to come, or when they didn't know if a shock would ever come. And he said it actually created an atmosphere of pervasive fear and anxiety, and he even called it dread or terror.
We have to remind ourselves that we are facing an enemy that is planning all over this world, and it turns out planning inside our country to come here and kill us.
And he said that that atmosphere could be ratcheted up progressively the more the experiment continued and the more unpredictable the shocks were, so that after a while, when the shock came, the pain actually was experienced as relief and almost pleasure by the subject. He called it a nervous breakdown, or what he described in another part of the article as the ultimate demoralization of behavior. What he extracted
Sorry.
from this experiment was the idea that there was such a thing as a coercive stimulus that could actually be used to create an environment of dread or terror or anxiety from a low to a high level, and that the scientists could actually, it was almost as if they were turning the volume on a stereo. They could
Wait, and she said something about finding that pleasurable and defining that as a nervous breakdown? Is that what she said? Like, I want to take it back a little bit. I don't want to do that, but I'm just gonna, just a little bit. Let me hear what she
He said that that atmosphere could be ratcheted up progressively the more the experiment continued, and
Aggression is one of the most effective ways of managing a population.
Institute of Human Behavior, and he was quite unusual. I think his background was unusual, and he was also an unusually perceptive and sensitive man. And one of the first and most significant experiments he did was called a preparatory set, in which he had a human being lie down, or usually it was a student, lie down and be attached to electrodes that would deliver a shock whenever a light went on. And then so he would shine the light and then shock the student. And at that point, several people elected to discontinue the experiment. But those who persisted, he would then vary the experiment by showing the light and then not shocking them, or showing the light and shocking them. He would sort of make it unpredictable. He discovered that people's state of anxiety and fear actually increased when the shock didn't come. When
It sounds like that would have been a good decision.
Or when they didn't know if a shock would ever come. And he said it actually created an atmosphere of pervasive fear and anxiety, and he even called it dread or terror.
We have to remind ourselves that we are facing an enemy that is planning all over this world, and it turns out planning inside our country to come here and kill us.
And he said that that atmosphere could be ratcheted up progressively the more the experiment continued and the more unpredictable the shocks were, so that after a while, when the shock came, the pain actually was experienced as relief and almost pleasure by the subject. He called it a nervous breakdown, or what he described in another part of the article as the ultimate demoralization of behavior. What he extracted from this experiment was the idea that there was such a thing as a coercive stimulus that could actually be used to create an environment of dread or terror or anxiety from a low to a high level, and that the scientists could actually, it was almost as if they were turning the volume on a stereo. They could decide how much of that atmosphere, how intense they would like it to be.
Needless to say, a creature in a
Let's get it over with already.
highly fearful environment will be eager to escape to a new environment. This includes human beings. Maurer suggested that new behavior patterns could be quickly created through his techniques. The prospect of creating new behavior patterns quickly and efficiently became an obsession during the Cold War, when the Central Intelligence Agency assumed dominance in the field of mind control experimentation.
These guys again. Aye.
During the Cold War, the national security state would take the logic of power to its logical conclusion. Known under the umbrella name MK-Ultra, mind control experimentation by the CIA would abandon any pretense to morality, leading to a nightmarish search for the holy grail of social engineering, a fully controlled, fully obedient human being.
Coming up on Secrets of the Dead, as World War II winds down, the Allies race to capture Hitler's best scientists and technology.
The Black Book had names, targets, places, people. The most important were the scientists, the German scientists.
Searching for rockets, planes,
anything you could write in a notebook,
and the masterminds behind them. Each side wants the advantage for the looming Cold War. The hunt for Nazi scientists, next on Secrets of the Dead.
The majority of media on the subject of Project Paperclip has centered on German rocket scientists recruited by the United States to prevent the Soviet Union from establishing military supremacy. Hollywood has dealt with the topic in much the same way, often adding humor to the equation.
I, for one, do not intend to go to sleep. I light of a communist moon.
Now, we will be in full control of this pod. It will go up like a cannonball and come down like a cannonball, splashing down into the water of the ocean with a parachute to spare the life of the spaceman inside.
Spaceman?
Specimen.
Well, what kind of specimen?
A tough one. Responsive to orders. I had in mind a chimp.
Chimp? Well, what the hell is a chimp?
A chimp, a chimpanzee, Senator, an ape, huh?
The first American into space is not going to be a chimpanzee.
Seldom discussed with equal candor is the recruitment of Nazi scientists who specialized in human experimentation. Among them were Kurt Blome, who tested sarin nerve gas on prisoners at Auschwitz, and Hermann Becker Freising, who conducted fatal experiments at Dachau.
The American people got hold of X number of German scientists, but they immediately ran into a problem. Many of these scientists were classified as war criminals because of their activities during the war, and therefore were not eligible for State Department visas and could not be brought into the United States.
Oh boy,
So
there's a
what the
pickle!
CIA did was create several of these different programs, including Paperclip, and their purpose was to, number one, recruit these scientists, and then number two, bring them into the U.S. while routing them around the State Department visa requirements. A well-known doctor who came in under Paperclip was Dr. Albertus Strughold, who did experiments during the Second World War that were full Nazi atrocity type experiments. For instance, they were interested in the effects of high altitude on human beings, so they built a special chamber. They would put a gypsy or homosexual or a Jew or whoever it might be into the chamber and suddenly drop the pressure down to the equivalent of 60,000 feet. This obviously was excruciating and caused the person to die. And then they would take the guy out of the chamber, dunk his head underwater, and cut his skull open underwater to see if there was air bubbles coming out of the arteries in his brain. And so, they did dozens and dozens of experiments of this kind. So this guy was brought over under Paperclip, became the father of aviation medicine in the United
What
States.
the hell kind of an experiment is
Worked at
that?
an Air Force base in San Antonio, amongst other locations. Has a library named after him at one of the Air Force bases in San Antonio. And the Texas State Legislature declared an Albertus Strughold Day in honor of him back in the 70s.
Whether Nazi scientists participated in experiments on Americans after their recruitment by American intelligence remains unknown. What such experiments became a matter of routine. Some of the studies were relatively harmless, if unethical. In 1966, the U.S. Army Special Operations Division dispensed a non-toxic bacillus to the New York City subway system by way of cracked light bulbs. Other experiments were not so harmless.
Oh, I hear the folk music. Does that mean we're about to bring it on home?
See the pyramids along the Nile.
It's literally Bob Dylan.
Watch the sunrise from a tropic
Wait. 1946, University of Rochester researchers inject human subjects with uranium in order to study how much they can tolerate before their kidneys become damaged. That's fun. Fun factoid.
You belong to me.
1949, mentally retarded children at the female Fernald School in Massachusetts are given radioactive oatmeal in order to test the effects of radioactive material on the human body.
See the marketplace in old Antietam. send me photographs in souvenirs. Just remember when
In 1950, the U.S. Navy secretly sprays a cloud of bacteria over San Francisco. It's all circle. Americans confined indigenous people to explanations for their own genocide, which the Nazis attempted to use their genocide as awful experiments and brought this Nazi spray. Yeah, I was gonna say that and be a smartass about how they were just copying us, but then he was saying about how they were cutting, killing people and cutting their brains open for some reason, and I just couldn't. Who cares where the fuck they got that idea? They still did that themselves. They didn't have to do that. The Atomic U.S. 1953 U.S. Atomic Energy Commission sponsors 9/11. Pregnant women are given 1 to 200 molecules of iodine, 131 to determine what stage radioactive iodine crosses the placental barrier. That's nice. The aborted fetuses are later studied. That's nice. 1955, the CIA conducts a biowarfare test for bacteria released in the Tampa Bay area. The sharp rise in whooping cough cases results causing 12 deaths. Nice. 1956, the U.S. military releases mosquitoes infected with yellow fever for poor communities in Savannah, Georgia, and Avon Park, Illinois. That's outside Chicago, I think. This also includes stillbirths, encephalitis, typhoid, and several deaths. Following each test, Army agents posing as public health officials test victims for effects. You Belong to Me? Is that what Bob was singing? Nice. 1957, Operation Plum Bob. U.S. military detonates. Why is it going so quickly? I know I can pause it should I need to. An estimated 32,000 cases of cancer occur among American civilians living. Due to the experiments, no one was warned. Okay. I'm guessing that was some kind of nuclear detonation or something. Is that right? Oh my god. Half an hour to go? Oh my god. I just moved all my docs and I realized I just did that. Okay. The sound cut out, right? Nobody else is hearing sound, are
It was
they?
in this environment
Oh, there it is.
that U.S.
Okay.
mind control experimentation came into being.
At the end of the war, the OSS was disbanded, and the same personnel really came together and formed the CIA in 1947. And the first documented CIA mind control programs are Bluebird and Artichoke. Bluebird was signed into operation by the director of the CIA in April of 1950, which is 3 months before the start of the Korean War. So all claims that CIA and US interest in mind control was purely reactive, purely defensive, and only in reaction to what the communist Chinese were doing to downed pilots during the Korean War, all of that is not true, disinformation, clearly disproven by the documents. Artichoke and Bluebird started in 1950, ran into the mid-50s and kind of overlapped with and were rolled into MK Ultra, which ran till 1963. MK Ultra in turn was rolled over into MK Search, which ran to the early 70s. And in the 50s, 60s, there's a variety of other programs, MK Naomi, MK Delta, QK Hilltop, Project Often. So there's a whole set of these projects. And the documentation basically stops in 1973. All programs since then are still classified.
Of particular interest were Nazi research papers by Dr. Kurt Platnow from Dachau concentration camp. Platner had found that prisoners, when given high doses of mescaline, openly expressed hatred of their captors while also exhibiting an increased willingness to speak frankly about their own lives.
The dream of MK Ultra was to come up with drugs that on the one hand would be sort of an ultimate truth serum, that you could give it to a person and they would tell you the truth about anything that you wanted to hear. And then on the other hand, there would also be some way to wipe a person's mind clean.
Heading up the CIA psychochemical experiments would be Sidney Gottlieb. In 1960, when the agency plotted the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, leftist president of the Congo, it was Gottlieb who personally carried the poison to the agency's chief of station via diplomatic pouch. A 1953 memo from Gottlieb states that MK-Ultra Subproject 6 is designed to develop a reliable source of lysergic acid derivatives within the U.S. The problem of supply was solved in October 1954, when Eli Lilly and Company, now known for manufacturing Prozac, succeeded in synthesizing LSD.
This pill can solve all of your problems. It's called Prozac, and it may mean the end of depression as we know it.
A special memorandum was rushed to CIA Director Alan Dulles on October 26th, and an unlimited supply of the drug was now available to be purchased by, and in some cases used against, the American taxpayer.
Target you.
As with the behaviorists, they started with animals. Here, we see millions of years of evolution turned upside down when a cat is given LSD. Soldiers came next.
I feel incapacitated.
One of the first major studies was conducted at the Edgewood Chemical Facility in Maryland, where approximately 7,000 U.S. soldiers served as unwitting guinea pigs. They were given
You hate
drugs such
people.
as LSD, mescaline, BZ, and PCP, then instructed to perform various tasks.
It's not all people.
Looking back at early behaviorist experiments, the analogies were obvious. Under the CIA and the Pentagon, what was good enough for rats was good enough for the U.S. Armed Forces. More than 1,000 of the soldiers emerged with mental health problems. Some attempted suicide. No compensation was offered. In a later experiment, and with the full approval of the National Institute of Health, Gottlieb arranged funding for a project at the Addiction Research Center in Lexington. Heroin addicts, mainly young black men, were kept on LSD for an incredible 77 days, a feat described by the center's director, Harris Isbell, as the most amazing demonstration of drug tolerance I have ever seen. But
I hate
they
these
did not
people.
stop
Anyone who
there.
could do this to animals. Yeah. Oh yeah,
Segment
it's
3 this
really, it's
evening is
legit
titled The
hard to
Children
watch.
and the CIA. We've learned a lot of unknown activities of the CIA in years past, some of them disturbing, to say the least. Tonight, we'll learn of the agency's interest in children. Paul Altmaier of our investigative unit has assembled these facts.
Jesus, how old is this?
Taken in the
1977.
1950s at a European camp of the Children's International Summer Village, a program designed to bring together children from around the world for a better understanding of one another. NBC News has learned that the CIA was studying these youngsters, some as young as 11, as possible future recruits. The studies took place at summer camps in Hennefest, Norway, and Vienna, Austria in 1959 and 1960. According to CIA documents we have examined, this was Sub-Project 103 of the agency's top-secret MK-Ultra program. San Antonio, Texas. NBC News has also learned that the CIA paid for a study of adolescence here and in two other Texas cities, Austin and El Paso, in 1958 and 1959. It was a study of how youngsters behave without adult supervision. This study, MK-Ultra Sub-Project 102, refers to data being collected on 462 subjects in 7 secondary schools. No child is identified by name.
That's good, I guess.
One of the most revered child psychiatrists in the entire 20th century of American psychiatry was Dr. Loretta Bender. She had a full-page obituary in the American Journal of Psychiatry, and that only happens occasionally. You have to be really a high-ranking person to have a full-page obituary. And she's famous for the Bender Gestalt test, which is a widely used psychological test. So not everybody in the mental health field knows exactly who she is, but all psychology graduate students have heard of the Bender Gestalt. and she was a child psychiatrist charged with care and treatment of children. And she operated at Creedmoor State Hospital in New York in the 60s. Her funding source is not stated in her papers. So where she got the LSD from and whether she was directly funded by the military or the CIA is not documented. But she attended many CIA-sponsored LSD symposia, talked with, was on panels with, interacted with most of the leading CIA and military LSD contractors. So I would say it's unbelievable that she didn't know that all of this was basically run by the CIA and the military. And what she did, again, is not the mad scientist hidden in the basement somewhere. These are papers in leading psychiatry journals, where she, as the author, describes children as young as 5 getting LSD, mescaline, psilocybin, other hallucinogens in street-level type doses for days, weeks, months, and in some cases years at a time.
Why? Mind control?
Under the rationale that somehow this was going to be helpful treatment. Again, no real follow-up. How many of these kids went psychotic? How did it affect their chromosomes? What was with their mental health from there on? So this is the kind of experimentation that you would think would be impossible, it would never happen. Somebody who claimed that would just be...
Oh, I'm not saying I don't believe it.
Themselves. But not only is it documented, it was published in the literature, and nobody seemed to be upset. Nobody complained to the American Psychiatric Association. Nobody reported it to anybody.
Okay, I don't think most people understood what those drugs were at the time.
The use of children in barbaric mind control experiments shows an evolution from the early behaviorists to the CIA mind doctors. Once the doctrine of national security had been invoked, ethical considerations received little or no attention. Almost anything could be justified by claiming the communists might be engaged in similar activities.
Well, then there's that brain rot, yes. But, you know, show me people not blinking at a study like that in the 1970s when everybody understood what LSD was.
Got to be able to take it. Because service means new
Just
physical demands on strength and endurance.
During the Korean War, in 1953, during a cessation of the war, American soldiers were returned home who had been prisoners of war in China. They started exhibiting very strange behavior. When the boat neared the shore, they were not very happy to come home. Even the sight of their mother's outstretched arms seemingly failed to move them. They were sort of stone-faced. They would start spouting communist propaganda. Some of them had seemed to have been converted to communism, and even 21 Air Force personnel had been persuaded to stay in Korea and start families there.
My name is Harold Webb from West Palm Beach, Florida. My name is Aaron Wilson from Urania, Louisiana. This is a very happy moment for me, for now I am free.
In small or large ways, they had collaborated or cooperated or allowed themselves to be coerced by the enemy. Many sociologists and psychiatrists and psychologists who both worked for the army, who worked for institutions like universities, were brought together in teams to study why this was happening. And one of the people who headed one of the teams was named Louis Jolyon West. And he was a talented American psychiatrist who was working for the army, and he headed a team that studied the returned soldiers from what was called Operation Little Switch. And these soldiers were displaying some of that behavior. And so they were trying to figure out what exactly had happened. They concluded that it was nothing, if it was brainwashing, it was not the typical kind of notion of what people think brainwashing is, which is some magical hocus pocus where the person loses their mind and like changing the software on a computer. One day they're good old-fashioned Americans and the next day they're these kind of rabid communists. But instead they were describing a process that much more resembled slow, steady, classical behavioral conditioning. So they came up with the words DDD for debility, dependency, and dread. Stability was basically that they'd been put in a situation where their wounds weren't treated and their health was low and they weren't fed very well, so they kind of developed a chronic debility, and sometimes they developed a condition that other soldiers called give-up-itis, where they would just simply lie down and refuse to take food and water and just die. And the second was dependency, that they were these soldiers were made to be extremely dependent on their captors for any kind of reward or any kind of, even anything resembling a small comfort or luxury or even just food to keep them alive. They were dependent on their captors, so that created in a way a kind of intimate bond. And then the third D was for dread, which was an atmosphere of fear and terror and constant unpredictability, where the prisoner would never be sure what was going to happen next. They could be kept awake for 48 hours or a week. They could be given a drug or not. They could be given food or not. They never knew when that would be coming, and they never knew if their captors would be treating them decently or not. So there was an atmosphere of this kind of extreme unpredictability, and all of that together was what they called DDD, which they said could basically be explained through behavioral principles. And what it resulted in was a dismantling of the self, or a demoralization of, to go back to Maurer's idea, the ultimate demoralization of behavior.
While the purpose of the study was to find out about communist brainwashing techniques, CIA documents show that the agency was interested in developing mind control methods of its own.
Jolly West would eventually achieve celebrity status in conspiracy culture for becoming the first, and one can only hope, the last man to kill an elephant by way of LSD. The elephant's name was Tusco. He resided at the Oklahoma City Zoo and died after a cartridge containing 3,000 times the accepted human dose of LSD was fired into his rump. West also served as a defense witness in the trial of Patty Hearst, who was kidnapped by the self-proclaimed Symbionese Salvation Army and brainwashed into robbing banks.
There's some feeling among experts, and particularly her family, that Patricia Hearst was brainwashed by the Symbionese Liberation Army. One thing cited to substantiate that is that two known SLA members, including the slain leader Donald DeFreeze, were inmates at a California prison where sophisticated methods of mind control are practiced on some prisoners.
And drugs are a vital part of therapy here. Everything
Whoa!
from sleeping pills to Prolixin, a heavy tranquilizer used to control schizophrenics. What concerns the critics of prison therapy, however, is the danger that the tools of modern psychiatry can also be applied to a captive prison population for convenience instead of treatment, not to make sick inmates better, but simply to make them behave.
In his 1973 State of the State message, then Governor of California, Ronald Reagan, announced plans for the establishment of a biomedical facility at Vacaville. It would be called the Center for the Study of the Reduction of Violence, and would use techniques pioneered by Jose Delgado. Delgado had gained worldwide fame for stopping a charging bull in its tracks by using a gadget he called a stimoceiver, a remote-controlled device that triggered electric impulses in the animal's brain.
Neurophysicist Dr. Jose Delgado was financed by the Office of Naval Research.
Were you sure
That's
that
really
bird
eerie.
was going to stop as it approached you when you pushed the right button?
Scientists always should have faith in science. I had faith in science.
Recently released CIA documents refer to the feasibility of remote control of animals, and that special investigations will be conducted toward the application of selected elements of these techniques to man.
In Delgado's papers, he's basically implanting electrodes in the brains of human beings and experimental animals. In one of these papers, he refers to the animals as mechanical toys. In the Harvard team, there's pictures of a 16-year-old girl. In one picture, she's staring off into nowhere with a bland, empty expression on her face. In another picture, she's strumming on her guitar. In another picture, she's furiously pounding on the wall, all totally controlled by which button is pushed in the neurotransmitter box. When you open somebody's brain like this and you put an electrode in and you keep it in for a long period of time, you're exposing that person to the risk of brain infections, meningitis, seizures, and death.
For prison officials at Vacaville, the idea of controlling inmates through remote control was a tempting prospect, and drafting the outlines of the new program was none other than Jolly West. West's proposal recommended psychosurgery as a tool for controlling prison populations and crime. Remarkably, he also recommended using schools in Chicano and African American neighborhoods to screen for possible, quote, genetic defects. The project was terminated, but only after public outrage forced officials to backtrack. West's research would lead to new dreams of what he called the psychophysiology of conditioning. West noticed that DDD bore an interesting resemblance to post-lobotomy syndrome, as well as altered states of consciousness produced by certain drugs, hypnosis, and mental diseases like schizophrenia. In all of these cases, the notion of self, of free will, is displaced by something more obscure. In West's words, the patient loses all recollection of the fact that he formerly possessed a space-time image which served to explain the events of the day to him. With these ideas in mind, large funds were poured into the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal, headed by Scottish-born psychiatrist Ewan Cameron. A future president of the World Psychiatric Association, Cameron set out to actualize the new vision of total control. He would create real-life blank slates out of his patients by wiping their minds clean and destroying their very notions of self. From there, new behavior patterns could conceivably be built upon the wreckage of their former identities.
The Allen Memorial Institute at the time was probably the leading academic center of psychiatry in Canada, attached to McGill University. And the chairman of McGill University, we're in the 50s into the 60s now, was Dr. Ewan Cameron, originally born in Scotland, emigrated to Canada. He had money from the CIA under MKUltra to do two basic things: a kind of brainwashing in which he would, for many months in a row, administer massive amounts of electric shock to a person. Linda MacDonald, she got over 100 electroshock treatments in a period of 4 or 5 months. Each time the button was pushed 6 times instead of once. So the electricity delivered to her brain was over 600 normal electroshock treatments. Also, people would get prolonged sleep induced by barbiturates, tranquilizers, antipsychotics, and so on. So this is the depatterning. And what would happen from this massive shock and drug-induced kind of sleep is what happened to Linda MacDonald. She went into the hospital in the spring, slightly depressed, otherwise perfectly normal, functioning, intact person with 5 kids. By August, she was incontinent of urine and feces, unable to feed herself, didn't know her name, didn't know where she was, didn't know what year it was, didn't recognize her husband, and didn't recognize her children. So it's a complete wiping clean of the brain.
They shipped me up to what they call the sleep room, and they gave me all of these electroconvulsive shock treatments and megadoses of drugs and LSD and all of that, and I have no memory of any of that. Nothing of that time of the Allen Memorial or any of my life previous to that. All gone. Wiped.
When she was released, she had to very laboriously learn how to play guitar, how to boil an egg, how to keep track of her kids. And this was the purpose of the experimentation. And obviously the CIA was interested in this only for one purpose, which is if they had somebody and they wanted to wipe out their memories, would this method work? And Ewan Cameron proved that it could. Building up the new identity was called psychic driving. And one of the techniques was they'd play either in Ewan Cameron's voice, one of the other doctor's voices, or in the person's own voice. They'd play these tape loops literally tens of thousands of times over and over and over and over, delivering whatever message it was they wanted the person to believe. of the disinformation
I wasn't
cover
imagining it
stories about
looking
all
like
of this
that at
is,
all.
well, first of all, it never happened. But then when it comes to light and there's lawsuits and publicity, then the next level of cover story is, well, that was back then, that was a different time, different standards applied.
Yeah.
We wouldn't do that today. But actually, in
Don't
fact,
buy
all
it.
the ethical standards of 2010 applied absolutely at the end of the Second World War and applied back in ancient Rome and Greece. They were clearly unethical, immoral, destructive, unprofessional, harmful to the brains and to the lives of the subjects. In some of the experiments, not the ones at McGill, but other ones, as reported by the doctors in papers in psychiatric journals, in some of the experiments, people died. In other experiments, they went psychotic. They were then treated with shock therapy. So long-lasting psychotic reactions, worsening of symptoms, creation of new symptoms, and in some cases death, are described by the doctors in their own papers where they're discussing the research. But during the Cold War, and this is up until the early 70s when the documentation stops and everything is classified, there was extensive, systematic, pervasive, structured contracting by the leading figures of psychiatry and the leading medical schools with the CIA at the top secret clearance level. The typical universities on the list would include Cornell, Harvard, Yale, Tulane, UCLA, University of Minnesota, Denver University, and so on. So it was not just some mad scientist in a basement somewhere.
Therapeutically speaking, the experiments of the MK Ultra psychiatrists were a complete failure. Yet, they were useful in at least one respect. The manual is called Kubark. Dated 1963, it is a how-to guide compiled by the CIA for interrogating suspects. In other words, a torture manual. Referring explicitly
A
to
Canadian movie based on events. Oh, the
as well as Cameron's
crazy
studies at
tape room
McGill,
scene. Okay.
it describes a phenomenon whereby the deprivation of stimuli induces regression by depriving the subject's mind of contact with an outer world and thus forcing it upon itself. As the interrogate slips back from maturity toward a more infantile state, his learned or structured personality traits fall away. Rather than red-hot pincers, Iron Maidens, and racks, the tools of choice would become the stress position, sensory deprivation, and electroshock.
The manuals that they wrote, which were based on the earlier behavioral
All right, 5 minutes.
experiments, were directly adopted during the
5
War on
minutes,
Terror.
you guys.
What happened was during the 70s and 80s, these manuals had spread in Latin America and other places for use in counterinsurgency movements, and these techniques had never really gone out of favor. So if you look at Guantanamo Bay, as of 5 years into the war, there had been 10 to 20,000 interrogations that took place there. So it's, you hear about the extreme interrogations, but what was really going on was a kind of routinization of the process of interrogating people and creating these environments in which they never knew if it was day or night, if it was going to be cold or hot, if they would be subjected to loud music or terrible babies crying or Sesame Street, or that it was a completely unpredictable environment that created
Sesame Street.
Stability, dread, and dependency. And that also is linked to the importing of people called behavioral science consultants, or biscuits, who were often anthropologists or psychologists who would come and kind of oversee and monitor these interrogations.
And they just said, become legal immigrants there, right?
Many decades later, the US government's mind control projects retain an aura of mystery. Former CIA Director Richard Helms claims to have shredded most of the remaining documentation. Yet Miles Copeland, a former CIA officer, claims the congressional subcommittee which went into this got only the barest glimpse of the US government's attempt to control the human mind. Whatever the case, exotic mind control techniques would not be required for the ultimate goal of controlling the opinions and behavior of the American public. The answer would come in the form of a small, flickering box. The
The one we've been
behaviorist
watching
Ivan
all along.
Adler
Oh
was
no!
the first scientist to explain why moving images are so
Sorry.
attractive to human beings. We instinctively react to any sudden or novel visual stimuli because of our biological orienting system. In evolutionary terms, this was and is necessary both for exploration of our environment and for defense against potential predators. Television not only entertains the mind, it relaxes the body. This has been confirmed by EEG readings of viewers' brainwaves as they watch television programs and advertising. In the hands of skilled media professionals, moving images create an effect roughly akin to hypnosis, producing passivity, a lowered level of alertness, and increased suggestibility.
So it hijacks that natural system, then, basically. Nice.
But some will get through to your home.
Which again, like education, can be used for good or ill, I guess. Right? It's a powerful tool. But obviously these people think it's a tool that can be used for, their own ends. They still think this is appropriate for their message. I mean, I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying I'm expecting clarification, and we've only got a minute and a half left, so...
During the Cold War and beyond, television programming would increasingly resemble an experiment in fear-based conditioning applied on a global scale.
Yeah.
The thesis of John B. Watson, that fear, not love, is the guiding force in human society, would no longer be confined to the realm of theory. It would become our reality.
So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy? Interesting. This film's dedicated to my aunt, Nancy Noble. As a teenager, she was interned at the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal, where she was subjected to CIA-sponsored mind control experimentation. Oh, great. Terrible. She never recovered. Oh, apparently that was the end of the file, so sorry. I will let the credits play out, but okay. Oh no, my jam, Sugar Rush. Okay, well, let's see if I can put these away and have you still hear me. Oh, hello? Yay! We're still going. Okay. I didn't cut that off. That was the end of the file. It ended itself. I turned it down, but my favorite artist being associated with human cruelty. Yeah, well, I guess you and the filmmaker, are in sync like that, right? Ooh, let's go ahead and turn that. My poor kid. I didn't clear off this dresser before I got down in here because I didn't realize I would need to do that. Yeah. Oh, that was a lot. But I guess you and what was it, Nick Noble, something like that, have similar taste in music. And like that would be my one beef with it, is that I feel like the art, the hand of the filmmaker. I hear a lot about the art, the hand of the author, where like stuff in stories is so obviously ham-fistedly stuck in there because somebody wanted to do it that way. Like at one point, I should have stopped it and pointed it out when it happened. They were talking about the lady who experimented on all the little children back in the 60s, I think it was. Uh, and I don't know. Maybe this wasn't random. If he has personal associations with that, I don't know. But I found that we found ourselves staring. Your Wi-Fi kicked you off? Oh no! You missed the last portion of that song. Oh no! You've seen it, right? No, so we found ourselves staring at like torn up furniture, like unstuffed, like a sofa that looked like a dog had been digging at it or something, and I'm just like, and like some random like mid-century period furniture, but like in disrepair. There were several shots of that while they were just talking, while this guy was talking, and I'm like, I mean, I get that you have to stitch together a vibe with your clips and everything, but that felt random, like not unrelated, but weird. Well, that's 15 minutes. Oh no. Yeah, I don't listen to a lot of genres associated with happy feelings. Oh, Scott Noble, sorry. So, it's a little, it felt a little hyperbolic in some places where it really doesn't need to be, but maybe that's me. Maybe he used those clips of the random mid-century furniture in, a bad state while that guy was talking about that lady experimenting on children, to like, I mean, I get the vibe that he was going for, I think, but it felt, just let the man talk, you know. I get that it's a little dry because it's just a dude talking, but like, that's okay. I don't know. I was 15 years old. That's crazy. But you were absolutely right to insist that I should watch it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry you missed the last part. I don't have time to go back and do it. I really, no offense. I don't want to go back and watch the last 15 minutes of that again. Oh boy. Um. But you make a good point. We could do this again in a couple of weeks, maybe, and just hang out, huh? Maybe from 11 to 1 instead of noon to 2. You know, yeah, random footage. I hear you. Yeah, and I'm sure that there was other places where it happened like that. That was just the one place I really noticed that the random footage was in there, and it felt random to me. I don't know. There are a lot of places where they talk about a person who did a thing, and then you see an image of somebody doing that thing or something very close to that thing, and it's just heavily implied that it is footage of the thing that he just said, and we don't really know that. You know, that's that's fine. I'll let all those slide. That's fine. But yeah, the random torn up furniture. But that's my one quibble. That and the Wilhelm scream in there somewhere. That might have been in the clip he was using because I wasn't looking at the screen when I heard it. But I definitely heard a Wilhelm in there somewhere, and the Wilhelm does not belong in that movie at all. That does not belong in there. Also, The Sleep Room is a movie which is obviously hyperbolic and dramatized for entertainment purposes. You're right. You're right. No, and I mean, how could you not use it? If somebody made a movie about it, how do you not use a clip from it, right? No, I get it. The tiny little like breaks in the clouds of levity. Not the clouds of levity, but the tiny little breaks of levity in those clouds. But we're just so the movie itself, the film itself sort of creates that that no, I've seen it already, so I don't need to. No, I know. But like, the film itself sort of creates that atmosphere of dread. I don't know. Is it possible to not do that when dealing with subject matter like that? Because you need to have the impact. You can't have the impact constantly. Because if you're consistently awful, people will just tune that out too. Right? You have to kind of take them on a little bit of a ride. Storytelling. Right? Oh boy, oh boy. No, and that's the thing about it, is that I already accept the conceit that the storytelling in that of that film was trying to convey, so I don't feel so bad sitting here nitpicking a little bit about, the delivery of it. I can't believe it's 2 o'clock already. Damn, that was a long movie and it took us too long to get to it, I guess. I'll stay for a few more minutes. Ugh, if only to try and cover that stink that movie leaves in the room. Oh my god. Not that it's a bad film. It's not the movie's fault. It's not the movie's fault. And obviously I have my own theories about what is going on these days. We could do a reading radical literature chapters live stream if you wanted. Okay. I mean, I really kind of just like hanging out with you guys. But do you have something that you would want to read literature? Okay. Like what? You guys have recommendations? Something that, basically something you think I need to read, because I would be the one reading it. So if I were to choose something I've already read, that would be sort of, I mean, maybe if I just had something that good, but we all know I don't have time to do that. I'm gonna add this to my list. Sorry. Oh yeah. See, here's what I listen to. This is my momentary new favorite song right now. I have no idea. Skip Bruden? I don't know. I don't know what that's about. I don't know what that is, but it's pretty. And it is my mood at the moment. So, but the point is that it hits on different topics, which gives you the opportunity to look into these different topics. Oh yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I hope you saw me making some notes over here. The branching off, I definitely appreciate that. And I hope you saw me, like, if I was looking away, it was not because I was not paying attention. I was listening. Some of that stuff was, like I said, literally hard to physically watch. So, in an effort to stick it through, I declined to do that here and there. His backpack is on the floor. I just realized that, but it's got nothing in it, so maybe that's okay. Today is his birthday, like I said, and I gotta skedaddle out of here and take his bike wheel to the shop so we can get fixed. Happy birthday! I'm doing his, and I'm gonna help him with his chores tonight. I can come on with you. I've got tons of nonfiction books. Oh yeah, like you did with Amanda that one time. That would be swell. That would be fun. Shit, then I'd have to figure out how to make that work. Because right now I'm still coming at you through the OBS Studio software. And, read them. Yeah. Ooh, so wait. We would each choose something, or do you want to just lead the reading and I'll lead the discussion? Or, like I say, we could just hang out. We don't have to do it all hierarchical like that. Oh, yeah, today's my son's 17th birthday. My older one. Excuse me. He's not here. But I'll try and remember to tell him that everybody in the chat told him happy birthday, because how funny is that? That sounds really fun. Couple weeks. And you said you wanted my email again anyway, right? It's just like the name of the blog, the old blog, Brazen She, BRAZENSHE @gmail. You can find me there. And like I say, I already have another pen pal that I've been meaning to write back for a week, so not that she'll see this, but sorry, honey. It's been a hell of a week, hell of a fortnight. It's one of the authors interviewed Chris Simpson. Wrote a great book which got banned when released, titled Blowback. Banned by whom? StreamYard. Oh. Is that who banned the book? Or is that perhaps a, like, how did she do that? She had, I know she had you on her channel. You know, and not having to put all that energy into churning out videos every week or every 2 weeks to give me time to look into how to do shit like that. And shit like this. You know. What topic y'all want? I have it all. I don't know. Behavioral control in the modern world is a favorite of mine. Do you have anything else along those lines? And when I say favorite, I mean, haunts me day and night. No, yeah, of course you do. Of course you do. All right. So yeah, email me, I guess, and we'll get it figured out over this week, over the next couple weeks. And yeah, if you can do Wednesday at 11 Eastern, that would be ideal for yours truly. You know, we can push it to noon if you want. I know you're not super morning person, the USA. I'm sorry. What about it? I missed the connection there. You like my glassware? This is top dollar glassware here. And it's not in any way a recycled pasta sauce jar. Why do you ask? StreamYard. I think it's pretty easy to use as a. Okay, cool. I'll write that down. Okay, you can read stuff about Dianic witchcraft since we've been talking occultism and stuff. Ooh, yeah. Actually, I like that too. So, how do you spell that? No, don't answer that. Keep this live chat up so I can go back and write down that email. Okay. Nah, I can get up if I have to. Okay. It's not that hard. It's just my old blog at Gmail. Book was banned in the USA. Oh, like it was banned from the whole country? Wow, that's incendiary stuff. I love it. A banned book from outside the country. Ooh, scandalous. That's something to put on the flyer, right? Oh, but yeah, it's time to get out of here a little bit early today. Or I guess I should hit the bike shop up on the way back. Yeah, I'll probably do that. Because it ties USA to bring Nazis and working with Nazis. I don't need that word. Oh, nice. Ruth Barrett is Diana Priestess and wrote Female Erasure. Okay. You know, I believe I have heard of / encountered that book. Oh, Bringing Over Nazis. Yeah. No. We got it. We got it. Boy, oh boy. So, yeah. Did you get the email? Do I need to, like, write it on a piece of paper and hold it up to the screen or something? I'm not patronizing you because I think I might just be a little wrung out from that. Like, wow, I feel myself all of a sudden kind of deflating. Like, ooh, you know. I feel like that yep was already there. It was released online by an independent publisher called Banned Books. Nice. Am I misremembering? You're in Canada, aren't you? Misremembering that? I'm so. I can say, in all honesty, I forget where I am sometimes. Don't take it personally. Hmm. Just hanging out. Yeah, answer me. I do. Look at that. I have a whole page full of notes from that. I've read Female Erasure. Unfortunately, I gave it to a colleague who's since moved away. Boo. Yes, please do that. You want me to hold it and write it and hold it up to the screen? Or I could just type it in here. Oh, I spelled it correctly. There we go. Not as fancy, but the real problem is I need to, like, I've got better lately about checking my email. I have. I have actually managed to get better, I think, about that. Because I keep seeing them. So I know you're Canadian, yeah. Okay, that's what I thought. So it is. It's a banned book from outside. It's foreign influence. Oh no. Y'all's reputation down here is in the toilet. I literally saw somebody, was it Jon Stewart? I saw somebody making a joke about how betraying Canada was like turning on the nice guy in the room, and I was like, man, do you know Canada? Ooh, or you can read Caliban and the Witch. Yes! Yes! You know what? Lady's choice. You do. If you're gonna read something, then you can choose whatever you want to read. Within reason, you know. You didn't miss it all. No, hi, Red. I'm running over today, so probably gonna have to stop at the bike shop on the way home, you know? Oh no, I got it now. Yeah, Caliban and the Witch. Okay. Alright. Rock and roll. So, yeah. You do have that one. Awesome. So, I hate to be a nudge, but I need to go. I've never heard of Caliban and the Witch. Is that one of Asimov's later books? No, but it could be. It could be a sci-fi novel. That's amazing. No, honey, but I guess you're gonna get to find out in a couple of weeks because dear Kitty Cat is going to do a reading for us. Isn't that cool? So many topics to choose from. It's a historical analysis on the witch burnings. Yeah. Yeah. So, which doesn't sound anywhere near as much fun as science fiction, but science fiction is so I don't, I must be so weird. Because I don't even agree with that assessment that I just gave. Y'all know how much I love Caliban. Yeah. I can read it to the boy? No. No, I don't think you should read Caliban and the Witch to our 7-year-old as a bedtime story. I don't think that's a good idea. For his mental health. Just his mother, I must be concerned about. Ground floor and all that. To the boy. That's great how you capitalize that. Mr. I grew up in Germany. You can't tell it all. Never shows through at all. That influence never shows its head at all. So yeah. I guess I would say email me. Technically, I suppose anybody who saw that could do that, but please don't, because shit. Like I say, I'm already behind on correspondences, so even if you do randomly write me, there's a decent chance it will not hear back because I will not see it. But I'm sorry. Oh, that movie has me all perturbed, and I need to go and digest it. I'm one of those people. I have to go and digest things on my own, and I can send over images contained within the book if you could upload them and show them on video. Okay. Remind me to check my email. Yeah. Do. I've been out of coffee for a little while. If you want sci-fi, ergo proxy. You're right. Yeah. I don't know. I don't. I don't have time for a lot of fiction right now. I don't have time for fiction right now. I don't. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, he'll remind me to check my email, and I'm gonna go. But thank you so much for giving me some hope for this venture. I want to say before I go, iced coffee and fridge, want it? Oh, the old one? Maybe that was mine from a couple of days ago or last week or something. On it. Distracted me. Oh yeah, thank you for giving me some hope at this venture and something to do with it besides grind against the algorithm. Sounds like so much more fun. I'm so glad I finally just came on here and talked to you guys. Thank you so much, really. And I'm looking forward to this. This is gonna be fun. So, on that note, Everybody have a good week, a couple weeks. Whew. And we'll be back. I'll see you then. I'll be